Welcome to Manhwa Recaps, spoilers ahead, watch out, and take care. Huge shout out and special thanks to the channel members. Sorry for the slow uploads, I was pretty sick until recently. But I am all better now, so hope y'all look forward to new videos. The manhwa starts with someone banging pots and pans to wake people up at a camp. We see a man in bed that doesn't want to get up, and another man saying there's something in his boot, and that it's a bug. This wakes the other guy up, and we learn his name is Incred. These people are his squad members. He says after causing trouble he was demoted to this position. On the battlefield, we hear the commander say to attack. Incred says he doesn't have any special powers, he got here with endless training. We see him block a hit, then returns with a kick. But another soldier tackles him, and starts to repeatedly punch him, but the enemy gets his head cut off by a friendly. Incred says he actually has no talent, he grabs his sword and begins to run saying his dreams are too far to reach. An arrow flies in, doming a soldier beside him. Incred sees this and is glad it wasn't him, but when he looks forward he sees a man charging at him. Incred grips his sword, saying he will become a knight. But he gets stabbed in the chest, but he says his dream was just worn out, as he starts to bleed out. He falls to his knees, and starts to lose consciousness. He says that he didn't even know that his death would be so pathetic. He hears the sound of a fire being lit, and he opens his heavy eyes, but it's blurry, and we see ripples below him. The banging is heard again, and he opens his eyes and the man from before says there's something in his boot, and freaks out again because it's a bug. Incred wonders if he's just feeling deja vu. He's back in the battle, and turns to see a blade flying at him. He gets stabbed in the throat. Saying it's his second time, then he dies for the third time, and the same guy stabs him making it his fourth time. He gets woken up again to the pots and pans, and grabs his throat to make sure it's okay. He's sent to battle again, and turns to see the soldier who has been killing him repeatedly. The soldier lunges forward. Incred says that he cannot escape this hell. It jumps to the soldier once more lunging, and Incred says he's seen it 17 times now. He closes his eyes and accepts his fate, saying this is his 17th death. And he wishes he put more effort into his sword. The soldier begins to walk away, leaving Incred in a pool of his own blood. As he lays full of regret, we see a blue lantern swinging, and a voice asks him if he truly believes that. As it's none other than the boatman to the other side. The boatman says to feel it properly, and give up, saying he needs to despair at the wall he cannot cross. But Incred wants no part of that, as his eyes are full of resolve. The familiar pots and pans clang again. The tattooed man says he's surprised Incred woke up so early. We finally learn his name is Rem, and Incred tells him about the bug in his boot. Rem looks inside of it, and dumps the bug out. Then stomps it, asking if he put it in there. He says he watched it crawl in earlier. This is his 18th time seeing that corpse. He wonders how many times he'll have to see it before he can move on from this day. Incred says he's wielded a sword since he was young. He learned swordsmanship from a retired mercenary who came to his village. We see the one-legged mercenary, telling Incred that if he's this good, he might actually become a knight one day. These words heavily influenced Incred, and that helped him dream of becoming a knight who can slay 1,000 people by himself. He began to grin at the thought of it. He thought he was the protagonist of a bard's song. It cuts to a bar, with people laughing, making fun of Incred asking how he can be a knight when he's scared of a dog. Incred realized that his talent is nothing special, but he refused to give up, as hard work won't betray him. He believed that with enough time and enough effort he would be able to overcome that wall known as talent. We see him stabbing a monster with his blade, and he says he's started to be acknowledged by those around him. He's actually becoming stronger, but that hope was shattered when he was stabbed after a child from the village he was staying in requested a duel, and won. The kid was 12 and had only been learning swordsmanship for 6 months. The man who spent over a decade wielding a sword, lost to a mere child. Incred really wondered if that was the end for him, but he took his anger and used it as fuel to continue training to achieve his goal of becoming a knight. He would skip out on eating and sleeping to train, continuously swinging at a tree to practice during his free time. He puts his all into one of his swings, causing his sword to vibrate from hitting the tree. He is gassed out and looks up at his effort, to see the marks he left behind on the tree. He says even if he can't become a knight, he lifts his sword up, and swings again saying he will at least become an experienced soldier. He screams out of frustration, and continued to practice his swings. 3 years later he heads to the Cyprus division. He became the squad leader of a second-rate squad. The best position he could achieve after his endless training. He calls out to one of his men named Jackson, who asks what he wants. Incred tells him to do his morning rotation for him. Jackson says alright, and just to repay him next time. Rem says that Jackson is like a wild cat, and all he does is glare. Ingrid calls out to him, and Rem asks if he's going to push work onto him too. Ingrid says he'd like to learn the heart of the beast. Rem looks taken aback, saying he gave up last time, asking if he thinks it'll work this time. Then the battle began, which Ingrid was killed in, and continuously died off spawn, even though he's learned the heart of the beast every time he wakes up. He can only watch as the blade pierces him. He says today for sure will be different. The soldiers start to roar before charging in. Ingrid says it's now his 21st time here on the battlefield. He's memorized the situation. He dodges the spear, then blocks an attack from behind. Then turns to see another squad member named Vel, screaming. Ingrid says he'll die soon, and an arrow flies in, but Ingrid blocks it. Vel wonders what happened, and another man goes to attack him, but Ingrid cuts the man down. He says he completed his first goal for today. All that's left now, is the soldier that is continuously killing him. The soldier draws his blade out of the enemy he cut down, then glares at Ingrid. He slowly walks towards him, but Ingrid is ready for this. The soldier lunges in at him like usual, and Ingrid recalls Rem saying he always closes his eyes during danger, then swings his axe at Ingrid's face, and Ingrid flinches, closing his eyes. Rem says he needs to be brave, and not to be agitated or taken aback, and that he must become someone who doesn't even fear death, just like a beast, that is truly the heart of the beast. Ingrid doesn't even blink as the sword flies at him. He says that he isn't afraid of death, as death only makes him stronger. He avoids the thrust for the first time ever. He keeps his eye on the sword and his heart begins to pound like crazy. Since he avoided the attack that's always killed him, he and the soldier stare at each other. Then both start to go in for an attack, but the other soldier is way faster, stabbing his blade into Ingrid's throat. Ingrid's eyes begin to see the underworld, as he begins to bleed out profusely. He hears the boatman. Ingrid sees the boatman approach him, and the boatman says to give up and get on the boat, acknowledge your weakness and be at ease. Ingrid says no, the day he gives up will never happen. He finally saw the tip of his sword, and dodged it. After waking up, Rem says he woke up early. Ingrid is now on his 22nd life, saying he'll challenge it again. It jumps to the midst of the battle again, and Ingrid has jumped to his 33rd life. He dodges the thrust once more, and as the soldier turns to continue, Ingrid dodges, but it's too slow as his throat gets sliced, causing him to drop to his knees. We see he has a necklace that falls off him, and Ingrid says that in his time as a mercenary, he subjugated quite a few monsters. He took the request from a random village who asked for help. He helped since he wants to be a knight, and protecting the weak is a knight's duty. The elder of the village says they are poor, and hands him something. He looks down to see that it's a charm. It was a laughable reward for risking his life, but the elder said it would grant whatever he desperately wished for. He wonders if this is the reason he is having a Groundhog Day. The soldier who stabbed him says he must be in pain, and raises his sword saying he'll grant him mercy. Ingrid says mercy my ass, as the soldier is enjoying the pleasure of killing him. He executes him, and the pots and pans clang again. He tells Rem he put a bug into his boot, and Rem asks if he's lost his mind to be doing this so early in the day. Ingrid tells him to stop yelling and come outside, as he wants to learn the heart of the beast. Rem swings his axe, and Ingrid keeps his eyes on it, dodging the swing. Rem is confused, asking how he stopped flinching all of a sudden. He tells him he trained, and Rem says it's not something that can happen so quickly, and there's no way his family technique was taught by someone else. Ingrid tells him that he learned it by chance. Ingrid grabs some weapons, saying that he would like to spar with him. Rem stares at him, then smiles saying that sounds great. Rem swings at him, and he avoids it. This continues, and Rem asks him how long he's planning on dodging. While charging in, he dodges another attack, and Ingrid says the only sword techniques he possesses is the Valen mercenary sword technique. It's often called a petty trick. Ingrid starts to lose his balance, and Rem leaps at him. Ingrid gets his balance back, and readies himself for the leaping Rem. Rem notices this, and just like how the soldier he is always fighting, he thrusts his sword at Rem, but Rem knocks the blade out of his hands. The sword slides across the field, and Ingrid says even if it's just for a moment, he imitated that bastard stab. He says his body remembers the technique. Rem says that it should have made him bleed. And among all of the techniques he's shown until now, that stab was pretty decent, and he tries to give him some tips on how to make it better. Rem says that if he doubts himself too much, it'll lead to nothing good. He says that he should start worrying about what comes next, rather than doubt himself, That is how he won't lose the grip on his sword, but in his own broken words. Incrid looks at him, and says even though Rem explained it poorly he understood everything he meant. The difference between his stab, and the soldier's, is that Incrid lacked confidence in his sword. The soldier kills him once more, saying he'll show him mercy, stabbing him again. Back to Incrid, he's training with Rem, who knocks the sword away again. The soldier kills Incrid yet again, and he instantly goes back to training with Rem. Incrid says he will repeat this vicious cycle, taking it one step at a time, or even baby steps if he has to. He dies once more, and we learn he is on his 111th life, yet it still wasn't enough, as he died again, jumping to his 123rd life, to be greeted by the sword to his throat again. In the next life, we see him shouting while swinging at Rem, and he actually manages to push Rem's axe back, using the thrust he's been killed by. Rem asks if he's crazy. We see that Incrid's hand begins to bleed. Rem says that his hand is gushing with blood. He asks him why he's laughing like a madman. But Incrid feels nothing but excitement, as he mastered the stab. He's back on the battlefield, fighting his mortal enemy. He thrusts towards the soldier. Now that he's mastered the technique, it grazes against the soldier's helmet. As the soldier also went for a stab, but lands it in Incrid's throat. Incrid says his first stab trade was a failure, but he refused to blink or let go of his blade. He falls to the floor, blade in hand. The soldier puts his foot on his chest, and is smiling, saying he looks like he's suffering. And repeats his line of he'll show him mercy. Incrid says that tomorrow, he will kill him tomorrow. The soldier laughs, saying there's no tomorrow for the dead, executing him. The bug from Rem's shoe tries to get away, but Incrid stomps it out, saying he saw it fly in. Rem thanks him, and Incrid says if he's thankful to take his guard duty. Rem wonders why he's being ordered so casually. We finally meet a new member called Big Eyes. Incrid tells him to get him a shield armor and a dagger, and he'll pay him later. Big Eyes is surprised, but says that he'll only trust him since he's his boss. Rem asks if he's ever been this pushy with his commands. Jackson says that they've always pushed their tasks onto him, and more members appear. Rem says that he's really acting weird today, as Incrid is usually not this tense. He's back to practicing on the tree. Incrid says he's felt an incredible amount of pain with every death. He wonders what'll happen if he doesn't win even after tens of thousands of times. He wonders what if he can find a way to escape and survive. He wonders if he were to escape if he'd wake up to tomorrow, or still repeat this day. He wonders if he could be content with the strength he's gained. But says he needs to stop being a bitch. He won't ever give up. He will overcome this wall to see what is on the other side. He thrusts the tree again, and again, saying he won't abandon this blessing of being able to repeat his life. He splits the tree in half. He starts to put on all of his equipment, readying himself for the fight as he truly believes he will win today. The horn of war is blown, and Incrid's squad starts to walk into the fight behind him. The war begins. Incrid says that the only reason he gets as far as he does in this war is due to luck, preparation, and keeping himself a cool head. We see a man coming at him from behind. He blocks the hit, cutting the dude's head off. Another soldier goes for his leg, but the shin guard blocks it, and he bashes his skull in. Another one throws the axe from behind him, and he dodges, throwing his own weapon at the man. He says this is only all possible due to the repeated lives he's spent here. He sees Vel screaming, and he blocks the arrow for him like before. Then kills the other attacker. Now it is time for him to face his wall. The soldier glares at him. He has a WWE stare down with the soldier, and the soldier charges at him. Incrid blocks it, but it shatters his shield. He throws the shield away, heading straight in, blocking the next attack with his sword. Incrid says that the soldier is a regular guy, close to being a prodigy, but lacks real experience. So is easily surprised. Incrid headbutts him. So the Valen sword technique with its many tricks is effective. Incrid gets some dirt on his boot, then throws it into the soldier's eyes. While he's panicked, Incrid leaps at him. The soldier sees this, and thrusts towards him. Incrid dodges the blade. The soldier lands after missing, and turns instantly to prepare for the follow-up. But Incrid does too, saying he knows now everything there is to know about this stab. Incrid attacks the blade, shattering it to pieces. We see an archer draw his bow back, and unleash it, soaring across the battlefield. The soldier lets go of his shattered blade, as Incrid goes in for the kill. He says he's won, but the arrow from before begins to fly in. As it gets close, it's broken by an axe throw, as the soldier is stabbed in the throat. Rem is the one who blocked the arrow, saying he's going to destroy the archer, but Jackson tells him not to waste his energy. The soldier starts to fall down, but has a look of disbelief on his face. He looks at the battlefield, and drops to his knees. Incrid pants, and looks down to see the soldier shaking in fear. Incrid readies his sword, saying that this is mercy, and cuts the head off of the soldier. Smiles just as it's happened to him. He has finally shattered the wall he couldn't surpass. But gets kicked in the back, by a man we'll call Ponytail. Incrid grunts in pain, and Rem starts to run and saying that it's a frog. We see Ponytail is actually a frogman. While Incrid is in pain, Ponytail says he's invested a lot into the soldier. He can't believe he was defeated. Soldier's nickname will now be Pervert. Ponytail says to die, while swinging his weapon. But we see the axe block it, as Rem is pulled up to help. He swings his axe down, but gets blocked. They both lean in and start to trade blow for blow. Another soldier goes to kill Incrid, but Jackson leaps in, cutting his head off. Rem creates distance, as does Ponytail. They have a standstill, and Rem says if he wants to kill his squad leader he needs his permission first. Ponytail asks how the weakling is commander. Rather than Rem explains to us that frogs are a race born to fight, and he'll either have to burn it with magic or kill it with one strike. Ponytail looks at Rem, wondering why he's on such a small battlefield, saying he'd have to risk his life to kill him. Then says it isn't worth it, and stands up straight. Then walks away. Rem calls him a coward. Jackson runs while carrying Incrid, and Rem helps block the soldier in front of him. Another soldier goes to follow up, but another party member stops him. A whole row of soldiers drop, as another one of the boys pull up too. Incrid's vision is blurred, and their allied force say to retreat. He closes his eyes while they all retreat. He plops back into the underworld, as the boatman says that he's managed to survive another day, but that's it. He won't be able to withstand the walls that keep appearing in his way. Giving up and falling into despair is his fate. Incrid starts to get up. We see the wall behind him, and he tells the boatman that the walls exist for him to overcome them. The boatman smiles, saying he awaits the day those eyes, which are filled with greed and ambition, lose their light completely. Incrid wakes up bandaged, and Rem says he is in the infirmary tent, and that he slept for 2 days straight. He tells him he saved him from the frog. Incrid is confused, and says if it was a frog he's amazed he survived. Rem asks if he remembers him, saying he's his bestest friend. Incrid says he never said they were friends, and calls him a noble hunter. Rem covers his mouth quickly, and looks around to see if anyone heard him. Rem says he can't just blurt out the secrets of others he has nothing to do with. Incrid says he thought they were best friends, but he realizes he's made it beyond that day. We learn Big Eye's name is actually Craze, saying he owes him triple what he spent. Incrid was wondering why he was here, and says that he wasn't anywhere to be found in the battle. Craze smiles, saying he'll take double as a discount. Jackson also comes to the infirmary. Incrid asks what business he has with him. Jackson throws something at him, saying to apply it in the morning and the evening. Incrid says that Jackson hates sharing personal items, yet he did it anyway. We learn the tall monk's name is Odon, and he's crying while praying. Incrid tells him he's still alive, and to go. That night he wonders why they are all taking shifts. He wonders if they are worried about him. Then another member comes in. He's surprised to see Incrid, asking why he's in here. His name is Ragna. He quickly leaves, and Incrid says there's no way he's worried, as Ragna is very carefree. Besides him, there are 2 soldiers in the infirmary. One is a platoon commander who always picks fights with him, and the other is a soldier he doesn't know, that just blankly stares into space. Incrid wonders why he's here. Then they hear footsteps outside, and all turn to see a long-haired elf woman entering the tent. She asks who the 444th Squad commander is. Incrid is confused. The other platoon commander calls her a fairy. She asks him what group he is with. He says his name is Vengeance. He is the 3rd platoon commander of the 2nd company. She asks if his company taught him to state others' races when he meets them. He apologizes, and Incrid says she must be the new commander of the 4th company. Incrid says he's the commander she's looking for. She says she's heard he's leading his difficult squad members well. She looks forward to his contributions. He's surprised she came here just to say all of that. As she goes to leave, she asks for the young soldier's name. He says Krang, but says it suspiciously. Incrid wonders if he just made it up, saying his attitude is also bad. He wonders if he's a noble. The commander gives him one last look, then walks away. Incrid wonders what's going on. Later on he says most of the pain is gone, and wonders if he should start training now. Vengeance asks where he's going, and he says the training area. Vengeance calls him an idiot, saying he's trying to act tough when he's the lowest ranking soldier. The nobleman says nothing. Incrid says he needs to recall the past battle. He spent a lot of money to learn how to do it when he was young. Incrid wonders what if the last attack he did failed, saying it isn't good to put all of his eggs into one basket. He makes some analogy about Rem's attacks all being lethal. Then the noble from the infirmary says he's working hard. Incrid is caught off guard, and he says that he doesn't know what he's doing, but his hands kept twitching in the barracks and now he's spacing out. Incrid says he was training his grip, and he's currently recalling the battle. The man asks why he's doing that. Incrid says so he doesn't get killed. The noble asks if he plans to become something by preserving his life. Incrid doesn't want to say it, since people laugh at his dream. He looks up, raises his sword up saying he wishes to become a knight. The nobleman is surprised by this and Incrid says it's the first time that someone didn't laugh at his dream. He says he forgot too, and he suddenly remembered something. He understood what he needs to do. Incrid watches him leave, and the man says if he becomes a knight to remember his name. Back at the camp, we see a bard playing to soldiers, and they are talking about Cyprus, the hero of the battlefield. Vengeance wonders where his morning rations are, asking if they are planning to serve them nothing. Incrid decided to walk instead of heading to the training area, and Jackson asks him how his injuries are. He tells him the medicine worked well, thanking him. Jackson says if he's thankful, to hurry and come back. That night the nobleman tells him good night, and Incrid says it back to him. Vengeance wants nothing to do with it. Incrid says it was a day of doing nothing. He hears the bard again, and wonders if the bard came this morning too. But Vengeance says the same thing about the morning rations. Then he realizes what this means. He jolts out of bed saying it can't be. But Jackson asks about his injuries again. Incrid tells him the same thing as before, only to get the same reply from Jackson. Cementing the fact he's in a loop again, he recalls the boatman telling him about the next wall. He wonders if he died in his sleep without noticing. He says it feels worse than dying in the battlefield, but it makes him more determined, as he was given another challenge. That night again, he wonders who killed him and why, saying the only person capable of getting in would be a knight. He says it must be an assassin, and they have to be among us. He recalls the commander saying that a fairy is light and nimble, perfect for assassinations. He wonders if she came here to figure out the location beforehand. He says he needs to confirm IIT, and there's only one entrance at the barracks. He can just scream to wake others up when he sees her. So he just needs to wait for the assassin, but a needle goes into his throat. He turns and says he didn't even see them coming in. He starts to grunt due to the pain, and falls out of bed. He says it's a numbing poison. He sees Vengeance also has one in his throat, and someone stands before Krang. He sees the assassin, and they raise their blade in front of Krang, stabbing him in the chest, killing him instantly. Another person stabs their way into the tent. He says it's another assassin. He looks up to see the commander girl, saying it really was her. And that it's the fourth company leader. He wakes up to the sound of the bard again, saying it's his third time now, and he wasn't even able to detect their presence, so it won't be easy. Plus the company leader, even if he stops the assassin, fighting her after is not possible. He says he feels helpless. He felt the same way a few days ago when he fought Pervert. But in the end he was able to overcome it, killing him. So as long as he doesn't give up, he will find a way to win again. He rips the covers off of Vengeance, and he says he's acting crazy. Incrid says that he was wrong assuming they were in the base, and he should be wary of outside. Vengeance mocks him, asking if today's training is catching cockroaches. But he says he guesses that's fitting for a lowlife. Incrid says he's glad he cares about him so much, annoying Vengeance, who says he was being sarcastic. Incrid sighs, saying he was too. Krang asks if they are arguing again, and says maybe he'll come back later. Incrid tells him it's fine, and Vengeance lays back down. He says that Krang is definitely the real target, and wonders who he really is, saying he's suspicious. But he doesn't plan to dig into Krang's past, if he doesn't want to talk about it / just like his squad members. But he was involved so he goes for it. He asks him what he is. Krang is taken aback, and Incrid wonders if he phrased it wrong. Krang says well that isn't something he can tell him. Incrid asks why not, and Krang says it's a long story. Incrid waits a second, then says that makes sense. Vengeance starts to flip out, asking why he's accepting such a shitty answer, and if he was going to accept it regardless, why even ask? He says that Krang is definitely not from this country considering his manners, and asks which country's spy he is. Krang stares at him, and Vengeance shuts up. Krang walks to him, saying he is not, and will not betray the kingdom. Incrid says he can see from his eyes and his movements that Krang has a knight-like aura. Vengeance asks if that's any way to talk to a higher up. Krang laughs, and Incrid says that he definitely isn't a knight, since he was also powerless in the face of the assassin. However, he is truly hiding something. That night they tell each other goodnight again, and Vengeance clears his throat to acknowledge them. Incrid wonders if it's because he's scared of Krang. He looks at the tent entrance, saying that if assassins barge in they would all die. He sits up out of bed, and Vengeance asks him what he's doing instead of sleeping. Incrid says that assassins are going to invade soon, and to cooperate if he wants to live. Vengeance gives him a gross stare, and says he's lost his damn mind. Krang smiles at the situation, and Incrid says that's the reaction he expected. But here's a voice asking how he knew. A poison needle flies through the tent wall, cutting his throat. Incrid wonders when the hell they got in, and reaches for his sword. The assassin flies in, killing Vengeance, and stabbing Krang in the chest, and Incrid drops dead. He wakes up, now to the 4th time, saying that since he has no evidence, he can't get their help with the assassins. He decides to tell the higher-ups, and one of them tells him to shut up and leave. Incrid decides to predict when they'll enter, and to scream. The wind blows the curtain entrance, and he wonders if it's now or not. He says now, and screams assassin, but gets stabbed in the throat. They pull their blade out, causing him to bleed profusely. They then run through the front door, and it jumps to him saying he has to ambush them before they can do anything. Though how is he meant to fight back against an enemy that he cannot even see? The next life he's standing guard inside the tent again, and they come up from behind and stab his throat again. He realizes he can't do anything if he doesn't avoid their poison needles. He wakes up, now for the 20th loop, and he says he still can't do shit against them. He starts to think, then smirks saying he's only died 20 times. He needs a way to avoid the poison needle first. He sees Jackson sitting down, and walks up to him while he's cleaning his dagger, and says this is the key. He asks Rem why he calls Jackson a perverted wild cat, and Rem says that's because he's a damn pervert. He always stabs people in the back and runs off, saying it's just like a cunning wild cat. Jackson sees Incrid, asking if his injuries are okay, and he says that Jackson would surely win against the assassins, but he can't take him with him, since he has no authority, and that it's a wall he must overcome by himself after all. He calls out to Jackson, asking him what he would have to do in order to stop himself from being assassinated. Jackson thinks for a second, and says he's not sure, since nobody has survived any of his ambushes, making Incrid realize he's found the right guy to help. He then asks Jackson if someone like him were to stab him in the back, what would he have to do in order to stop it? Jackson thinks about it, saying he's not sure as nobody has ever survived. Incrid's face still looks determined. Jackson thinks about it, and then lets out a long sigh, saying that he needs eyes on the back of his head. Incrid wonders what that means, and asks him. Jackson says perfect timing, asking if he sees the wagon behind him. Incrid asks where, and Jackson says behind the tents. Incrid wonders how Jackson noticed something so far away, asking if he really does have eyes on the back of his head. Jackson tells him that it's going to fall apart, and then on cue, we see the wheel pop off, and it falls over. Incrid is surprised, asking him if he's a prophet, but Jackson says he just has spent too much time with that barbarian. Incrid tells him to stop kidding around, asking him how he knew. Jackson points to his ear, saying sound. He heard creaking from the wagon's axle. If you can hear what's around you, you can predict what's going to happen next. Incrid is surprised that he heard something so quiet as he didn't even hear the wagon itself. Jackson says basically you don't need to see to sense what's around you, and you can keep trying to listen to what's around you to practice, hone his senses, and isolate the sounds. Incrid says that was a nice explanation, and before he would be too lazy to even reply to him. Jackson says that's just how he is, but it's better to do this than have him on his heels, and nowadays it seems like he's too determined to give up. That night, we see Incrid in bed, saying that he's come across his second wall now in the form of faceless death. He can live if he can sense them. We see him focusing on his ears, and he hears the footsteps of the patrol along with the sound of torches outside. We see the assassin flying in, but Incrid has not heard him yet, and wonders where it is. We see the assassin landing, but Incrid still has not sensed him. The assassin vanishes, and then a needle quickly goes into Incrid's throat. He opens his eyes, saying of course he failed. He wakes up the next morning to the same chant about Cyprus. He says he has not taken a single step forward, but his body remembers everything, such as the experience of loaning, the heart of the beast, and the stab. Jackson tells him that he can gain a lot of information from sound. You can tell the location of something based on the intensity and direction of the sound, and once you're able to hear faint, faraway sounds. At that point, your ears might as well be a second pair of eyes. Jackson snaps his finger, explaining how sound is a wave, and the wave rings out in all directions, no matter how silent it is. In the chaos of thousands of sound waves mixed together, he needs to isolate one single wave. Ingrid starts to overhear everybody's conversations, thinking about how all the sound is entangled, and that he needs to isolate and categorize them. He says all the flags sound like one large one to him, and tries to remember how many there are, and then starts to focus on the footsteps close to him, and to really feel the sound around him, focusing on the familiar ones first, followed by the unfamiliar ones. We hear Krang say Enchi, and Ingrid opens his eyes as Krang asks him what kind of training this is. Ingrid asks about the nickname, and Krang says that it should be fine since it's just short for his name. Ingrid says he's not a fan, but if that's what he wants to do, that's okay, and then asks what part of this looks like training since he's just sitting here like an idiot. Krang says that he already knows that he is not somebody who wastes time. Back tonight, we see a needle flying in, and again, it hits Ingrid in the throat. He glances over to see Krang getting stabbed in the stomach. Then the assassin goes in for round 2, causing Krang to spit out blood. We learn that he is now in the 33rd loop of this, and again on the 34th, he did not hear anything as well, which led to another failure as Krang died. This repeated over and over again. We see him sitting there, focusing again on trying to listen to the sounds, and he explains that he does not need more experience to overcome this wall. There's no sudden realization or divine intervention. He just needs to repeatedly do this over and over and over until he can hear the sound of the bird. We see a bird landing atop a flag. He hears it, so it means the assassin's footsteps should be able to be heard as well. He opens his eyes to Krang, who says that he's surprised he snuck up on him, yet he knew he was here, and says that since his eyes are closed, he must be training his perception, and repeats the words that he knows he's not somebody who wastes his time after all. We see that Ingrid's eyes have a different feel than usual to them. It jumps to the assassin raising his shoulder and throwing the needle towards Ingrid's throat. He then avoids it and reaches for his blade under his pillow and swings at the assassin, which makes him fall over out of sheer panic. The man begins to sweat nervously, and Ingrid smiles, saying that he's no longer a faceless death. The assassin starts to grit his teeth, and attacks back at Ingrid, calling him a rat. Ingrid realizes that he's not as good in combat as the pervert, so he can easily handle him. He looks over, wondering about the others, and he sees Vengeance has a needle in his throat, but Krang is still okay. The assassin comes in, and Ingrid dodges it, saying he shouldn't let his guard down because he's still an experienced assassin. The assassin then throws a dagger towards him. Ingrid narrowly dodges, but it still cuts his chest open. The assassin doesn't want to miss the chance, so he runs in towards Ingrid. We see the tent get cut open, and Ingrid looks over, seeing the ferry company commander, and realizes that if he doesn't stab first, he'll die, so he thrusts towards her. The assassin then yells about him having a guard, and throws out a ton of poison needles towards them all. He turns around, but it's too late to react as they fly towards Krang as well. We see the company commander leap over Ingrid's attack, and use her cape to block all of the poison needles from hitting Krang. Ingrid says he thought she was an assassin, but she actually came to protect him, but regardless, now it is his chance. He lowers himself to the ground, and leaps forward towards the assassin. The assassin tries to block it, and we see the attack knock his hands away. The assassin grits his teeth, and tries his best to run, realizing that he needs to get out of here. Ingrid doesn't chase him, and says he can't believe he'd run away like that. Krang sits up, saying that he was probably after him. Ingrid says he knows, and Krang asks how. Ingrid says there's nobody who'd pay an assassin to kill a boot like him or Vengeance. The company commander says exactly, and tells him that he's fast on his feet. While reaching for her sword, Ingrid realizes that even if she was an ally just now, she can't let what happened here slip out, and she doesn't plan to leave any witnesses. Ingrid tightens the grip on his blade, and then Krang steps in front of them both, saying that he has a favor to ask her as he does not want anybody to die today. Ingrid wonders what's going on, as we see her bowing, saying as he wishes. Krang says that includes Vengeance, and that he isn't dead yet. The company commander says that they have an antidote, so he should be fine. Ingrid realizes that she is knowledgeable in poison if she could tell what it was at first glance. Krang thinks about it, saying they need to clean up this mess, and it's going to be a bother if people find out that an assassin has been here. Ingrid asks if it's fine as long as there are no traces left, and looks over at a fire, saying that there's actually an easy way as we see their tent set up in blaze. Soldiers from all around start running over with buckets of water, saying there's a fire in the tent, and that there are 2 survivors as we see Ingrid and Vengeance. Ingrid says with this, The traces of the assassin have been removed, and that they will take care of the rest. It jumps to a bird soaring in the night sky, as we see Krang and the company commander. She says that if Incred didn't slow the assassin down, Krang would be dead, and she asks if he changed his mind due to that. Krang says yes, asking if she agrees that he is interesting, but she does not answer, and just looks away. Krang says he's been trying to avoid it, and he recalls how hard Incred would work in the mornings, and smiles, saying that he has rubbed off on him, and that they'll meet again in their respective roles. We see a scythe as it is coming out of the water, and then it quickly dissolves as he sees the boatman. The boatman tells him that he'll see him again, and Incred says anytime. He says that he survived against the second wall, and woke up the next day. He can sense the presence of most things, yet he could not sense the company commander, and he has a lot to do when he gets back. Incred says thankfully he wasn't hurt, so he can return immediately. Vengeance asks him if he saved him from the fire, and asks him why. Incred wonders why he's giving him shit for saving him, and why he dislikes him so much. He simply tells him it's because they're comrades, and he doesn't need another reason. Vengeance looks off to the side, a bit guilty, and says even after all the shit he's put him through, he's very selfless, and he asks if he's returning to his squad. Incred says yes, and Vengeance says he's shit out of luck as the vibe is going to be horrible out there. Incred asks what's going on, and Vengeance explains that there's a rumor going around that the entire base is cursed. We see somebody from Incred's squad calling out to Rem, calling him an underdeveloped monkey, and shoving him. Rem looks excited, and we see people running away, saying that the squad is fighting again. As we see him lift him into the air, and throw him into the table, breaking their shit. The man attacks back at Rem, but he avoids it, and then returns with a solid right to the face, and pulls out his axes, saying he'll decorate his skull with it. The man pulls his own sword out, saying that he's going to split him in half. Incred finally makes it there, and says he doesn't know about the base being cursed, but these bastards might as well be his curse, and he sighs, telling them all to stop it. We hear them say that they thought he died, and he says that he didn't, but he might go crazy because of them. 4 days have passed since Incred has gone back to his squad. We see him in bed, and he opens his eyes to Jackson standing above him. He said that he was trying to leave quietly, asking if he woke him up. Incred says no, and he's gonna wake up and work out anyway. Jackson says that he only started recently, but he's really good at listening already. Incred tells him that he's been practicing, and Jackson says to keep it up as it'll help him someday. Battles are far and few in between. With winter approaching, the best thing for him to do right now is to solely focus on training his body to the limit. As we see him doing one-armed pull-ups on a tree, we hear a man saying good morning to him, and Incred looks down at a rock, and underneath it is Odan. He asks if he's returning from his morning workout, saying that he is keeping busy. He drops the boulder and says this is good. We see him starting to stand up as he towers above Incred, and he says a well-trained body is a weapon in itself, and he should be able to even withstand a kick from a frog. But that he's too thin, so he needs to continue training. Incred says he's just excessively large, but he'll try it. Odan starts to talk about the training technique he told him before, and then we hear something going down in the tent beside them as we see Rem kicking the man that he was fighting earlier out of bed, saying that it's his duty, yet he's still asleep, calling him lazy. The man starts crawling towards his sword, grabbing onto it, and swings it, telling Rem to eat his ass. Rem starts to swing back, and Incred enters, asking why they're fighting again. Odan tells them that violence solves nothing. Rem explains that this dude is trying to starve them, and Incred says if it's his turn to start cooking, then to do it, and Ragna says okay. Rem tries handing him an apron, telling him there's no need to act like this if he's just going to do it anyway. Ragna slaps it away, saying that it reeks, and Rem starts sniffing it, saying that it smells good. Incred asks if he's bored since he's picking fights for no reason. Rem asks if it's that obvious, saying that the lack of battles is making him itch. Incred tells him not to take it out on randoms, and to come with him as he'll fight him. Later on in the day, we see him get kicked in the side, and Rem says he needs to take hits better as he comes in with his axe, knocking Incred's weapon out of the air. Incred keeps himself calm with the heart of the beast, and as Rem comes in with another attack, he deflects it, saying that he needs to utilize his hearing to block hits. He will continue what he learned while dying hundreds of times, and thrusts towards Rem's face. Rem avoids it, but it was still a good try nonetheless. Then he grabs onto his sword with his axe, using it to hold him there, and then grabs him by the collar, using his own momentum against him to push him into the floor, saying that he was expecting more since he improved so much recently. But asks what made him boring all of a sudden, saying he's seen the stab a lot now, asking if there's anything new. Incred starts to get back up, saying he knows that he's different now, and he can repeat everything hundreds of thousands of times. He glares at Rem, saying to try it again, and he'll destroy him this time. Rem starts to think to himself that even if his skills are really bad, he doesn't get sick of seeing how determined his eyes are. He smiles, saying that he can only say that after he's laid a scratch on him. It begins to rain, and they both look up, surprised as it came out of nowhere. Back inside their tents, Ingrid says that it starts and stops whenever it wants. Rem says that he's gonna start growing mushrooms on his feet at this rate. We see Ragna asleep, and Odan praying. Another man enters, asking how many times he's going to have to cancel his duels because of the rain, and he believes the curse rumors now. Ingrid asks what he's talking about, and the man asks if he didn't hear. Ingrid says that now that he thinks about it, Vengeance mentions something about it. The man says that the weather is weird, and that casualties are increasing, and they keep getting hurt, especially Jack, Bo, and Rotten, as they are all hurt. People are saying that they're cursed due to this, but he's sure they aren't cursed, and that the temperamental weather only added fuel to the rumor. Ingrid says that the higher-ups won't let something like this go unnoticed, and the man asks why he's doing it in the downpour, and Ingrid says that's exactly why. Rem asks if he's a stray cat and what purpose this would serve. Jackson tells him that it's a good idea, and to keep it up, and Rem looks at him, scoffs, and starts yelling, asking what he taught him, and when he started caring for the squad leader. As they start yelling, Odan says if he's looking for a way to train in the tent, there's some things he can do even while laying down. Ragna asks if he wants him to look at his stance again. Rem turns around, saying look at all these guys, and they all continue glaring. Jackson glances over while Odan smiles, and Ragna still just keeps staring at the back of Ingrid, and Rem says that he noticed. As we see Ingrid still looking outside the tent. It jumps to a war room, and a man is telling all the commanders to keep their soldiers in check. They should send out a scouting party before the winter again, and ask if anybody has suggestions to fill in the gaps. We see the ferry commander suggesting the 444th squad leader. The man instantly says that he's a little dumb, and that he'll probably hold the scouts back. She tries telling him that he could bring about unexpected results, and he asks why she thinks that, and she tells him that it's just a fairy's instinct. The next day, we see Ingrid talking to her, and he's asking her why he's being sent to the scouts, and she glares at him. It jumps back to the man from earlier asking Ingrid if he pissed off the company commander, and he asked what he could have done to do that, and he suggests that he did because there's no other reason for her to specifically pick him. He wonders if she's going to kill him now that Krang has left. Rem asked if he's really going, saying that he can help him get out of it while holding his axe. Ingrid says it's not like he can use that axe on a superior, and that he's not like Rem. Rem says that's not what he was going for, and Ingrid says that he'd better not do it either as he has a history of being violent. We see Odan praying that they don't take Ingrid away from them, and he wonders what's wrong with them all. Ragna sits up, saying that he can go in his stead as well. They all kind of stare at him funny because they know he's directionally challenged. Jackson says if he's going to be scouting in tall fields, and that he needs to pay attention to the changes in the grass, noticing disturbances, and that's the first step to overcoming an ambush. Rem starts chirping up, saying that he told Jackson to stop teaching Ingrid this weird stuff. Ingrid sighs, saying that nobody will prevent them from fighting once he is gone, wondering if it is okay to leave them here, but even he agrees that there's nobody better suited than him. After enlisting, because of his lack of skills, he constantly moved around filling in for other people. The one place he ended up being useful was here. As we see Jackson and Rem both going to attack each other, Ingrid steps in between them, which catches them off guard, and they both stop their attack. He tells them to give it a rest. Rem asks if he's brave or stupid, and Jackson tells him that he should be thanking him, otherwise he'd have a hole in his chest. Ingrid says that they are really skilled, so they can't lose them, and compared to them, he's not much of a loss in combat power. There's no need for this sudden contemplation. He knows where he stands in terms of skills, and that he has a lot of room to improve. We see him walking through the woods with the other scouts as they are heading to the front lines. One of them sees him with his eyes closed and tells him to lock the fuck in, saying that they may both have the same rank, but he's the leader of the scout squad, and if he has a problem, they can fight it out. His name is Andrew Gardner. Somebody else laughs, asking Andrew if he really thought Ingrid would fight him, saying he's an outcast. Andrew begins to smirk, saying that if he does try, he'll make sure not to hurt him, and then he starts flaming him, saying that a squad is only functional because of its members. He tells everybody to listen up, if they meet the enemy, they'll bash their skulls in. Ingrid says they are very loud, asking if they don't understand what scouting means, and that Andrew is too green for this. They spot some tracks on the floor, and Andrew says they are new tracks. New is a type of animal, and he says that they'll follow the tracks and have a barbecue tonight. Incrid says that New travel in groups of at least 20, and if he's seriously gonna go fight this, wondering what is going on inside his head. Another man starts laughing, saying that's not a New but rather a gazelle, and he looks at Incrid, who's glaring at him, and says that Andrew is kind of obnoxious, and his name is Henry. He's previously a hunter and didn't seem to care for the squad lead. He ended up talking to him out of luck, and they became close. Henry talked about the basics of being a hunter, which he thought was very helpful, and Henry talks about how there are usually separate paths for animals in the fields, and he'll tell him more about it tomorrow. At night, we see Andrew saying that it was a New for sure, and that he needs results more than anything as Incrid watches. The next day, as the squad heads out to the fields, Andrew says that this is the location that they're supposed to recon. Called Green Pearl, aka the unnecessarily tall grass field, as they all stare at it. Andrew says that they'll cross this field, find the hostile party, and bring them back as prisoners. They say yes, and as they continue, Henry asks if they're really going in here, saying that they're just supposed to scout, and Incrid says that it's the squad lead's command. As they're walking through, Incrid says that it's not that easy, and he thought Andrew would give up soon, but it's not, as this is unexpected. He's not complaining, and he's taking this seriously. Henry notices there aren't many animal droppings, and Incrid asks if that's a problem. Henry says that means that there aren't any animals in a place where food is abundant for them. We see a paw raise into the air and then slam into the ground. Incrid instantly feels a chill on his spine as we see a panther running by him in the grass. He makes eye contact with it and pushes Andrew's head down, telling everybody to stay low. As the panther was running from something else, two people catch strays in the head, and Andrew tells everybody that it's an ambush as we see their ops have pulled up. He calls for them to run, and we see everybody hauling cheeks. One of the men gets held down, and we see them capture Andrew. Henry gets stabbed in the chest, and Incrid turns around, seeing the enemies are closing in, and he can tell based on his senses that he's completely surrounded. Incrid continues to run as we see a crossbow being armed. He hears this, saying that the listening technique he learned from Jackson is definitely helpful as he dodges an arrow from behind, but then he begins to hear way too much sound, saying that he doesn't know what's with all the noise and that in the end, it's only helpful. As we see hella spears coming in, and he is soon impaled, knowing that they were going to be ambushed, it makes sense trying to avoid it. We see him trying to convince Andrew about it, and Andrew asks him if he wants to get his head cut off, and Incrid realizes there's no way they'll listen to what he says, asking if he needs to find a way to make it out alone. We hear him trying to tell everybody that it's an ambush and to run away, and that he tried using a different path to escape, but he was stopped by the enemies once again, and that Henry was killed too. He says it's okay as he can always find another way, and he has the repeating time loops on his side. We see a firing squad pull up, and he catches a whole lot of arrows to the chest. He got caught by 20 or so crossbowmen from the east, and died after being riddled with arrows. He moved north to avoid them, but met a squad of spearmen. We see him grabbing dirt as he slowly crawls after being shot with arrows. Even if he manages to avoid them all, they never stop pursuing him. Their uniforms are dyed green as if they've been preparing for one. He wonders what's there to guard in a field like this in the first place. As he continues crawling, he spots a fire and a flag, and then gets his head clean cut off. As his blood begins to pour out, he wonders what they are hiding here. It jumps back to Andrew, telling everybody that they'll cross this field and bring them back as prisoners. Incrid has heard this a dozen of times, and once they head in, there's no making it out alive. They are definitely hiding something, and he needs to figure out what it is. If he gives that up, he won't have to die. Henry calls out to him, seeing that he's lost in thought, and Incrid realizes that if he tries to avoid it, it means that it'll be the end of the loop. But he decides that there is no running away from this wall. Andrew calls out to him, asking what he's waiting for. One of the members tells Incrid that he knows Andrew is an asshole, but just to go along with it, and that he has his own difficulties. Incrid asks why he would do that, saying that there's a limit to how much bullshit he can tolerate from an idiot. Asking the man if he's tired of kissing Andrew's ass, the man starts to get angry, and Incrid pushes him out of the way, saying that he's no longer playing this game. Andrew goes to draw his blade, asking him if he's disobeying orders, and Incrid realizes he needs to reframe the situation, and tells him he's not disobeying him, rather he's going to be the one giving commands from now on. Andrew starts to get angry, and Incrid explains how he survives the longest, along with the other soldier and Henry. The soldier with the scar on his face is as tough as he looks. He's the most skilled one in the squad, but stays on Andrew's ass, and he's got to be some type of bodyguard or babysitter. Andrew draws his blade, saying that he can try to take command if he can beat him, and tells him to draw his sword. Incrid says a normal soldier wouldn't have a bodyguard, and that he's obviously properly trained by his posture, and that Andrew must be the son of a rich lord, but says if that was the case he wouldn't be so eager for results, and suggests that he is a fallen noble. Andrew says that judging by his pathetic skills, yet high rank, he must be someone who never trains while leeching off money. Incrid says whatever he is, he can't keep following his orders, and Andrew starts to tell him that he's different from him, as he has a mission to fulfill. Incrid starts telling him to come at him, saying that he doesn't know why he's running his mouth so much, and that he's light work. This pisses Andrew off, and he starts to run at him. Incrid says that normally he would struggle against someone like him, but he's obviously being looked down upon, and that his brash actions will lead to carelessness. Andrew thrusts towards Incrid's head, and Incrid uses his hand to deflect it, saying that carelessness is the best chance he has. As Andrew's arm is sent flying backward, he realizes that he made a mistake. Incrid capitalizes on it by getting in close and punching him in the stomach, causing Andrew to spit up and fall to the floor, coughing. His babysitter and Henry are both surprised that it took one punch, as they thought that Incrid was a weakling. Incrid says from now on, the squad is under his command, asking if anybody has issues with this. Henry is speechless, and the babysitter starts thinking about it, and looks down at Andrew, who looks disappointed in himself. The man sighs, and Incrid says that this is the first step. We see them walking through the forest, and they wonder what Incrid is thinking. Incrid then asks Henry what his dream is. Henry is a bit taken aback, and wonders why he's curious, but tells him that he wants to marry a beauty who runs a flower shop. Incrid says for him to do that, he has to survive. Henry asks another man, and he says that he recently became a father. Incrid tells him if he wants to continue being one, he has to survive. This continues, and we learn that one of the soldiers wants to open his own business, and another wants to return home. Incrid asks Andrew, and he says that he wants to fulfill his mother's wish, and that his mission is to revive House Gardner. Incrid says that since they all have dreams to fulfill them, they have to make sure they get out of here alive. He stops walking, and tells them, rather than trying, they will guaranteed make it out of here alive. Everybody is surprised by this, and Incrid says that he needs them to move proactively, as there's nothing more motivating than life itself, and the enemy will soon appear, and he was planning for them to break through. He points towards the grass, telling Henry to shoot an arrow over there, at head height. Henry tries to tell him there's nothing there, but Incrid says he's not repeating himself and to shoot. Henry fires his arrow off, and we see it hit one of the men in the face. The enemies then yell that they are being ambushed, which surprises Henry and the others. Incrid draws his blade, telling Andrew to stay on his ass. Andrew grits his teeth and runs in, and Incrid says that he was wrong, and to fight with the upper hand, they need to find them first and ambush their enemies. As we see him stab one through the back, and then he readies himself for the next one, the enemies start to wonder what's going on and yell to kill them. We see Andrew stab one in the throat. Incrid says they need to take advantage of their confusion to reduce their numbers as much as possible. The reason he brought Andrew was because his bodyguard will follow. We see one of the men going to attack from behind. He instantly gets his head cut off and then cut into pieces by the babysitter. Incrid says this will be the best chance they have. We see Incrid cut one of their arms off, saying that the enemy, which originally numbered 12, has been cut down to 8 people. The rest are coming up, and we see the rest of the boys pull up. Incrid orders them to kill them all. The boys charge forward, dealing with their enemies. Incrid says in a tall grass field like this, the enemy soldiers have a hard time finding their location too. There is one reason they discovered them first. We see the panther running by them. One of the enemies gets jump scared by it and then tries to attack it, but Incrid comes out from the side and stabs the man in the stomach. Incrid says they were chasing the beast the first time around and coincidentally discovered them. This time they failed to notice their ambush because they were focusing on chasing it. Things are going smoothly, so he won't let it die easily. Henry tells them that they have finished, and we see Andrew is gassed out while his babysitter cleans his sword. Incrid tells them they will be moving immediately, while the panther watches him from behind. After one casualty, their unit has 6 people remaining. Even after multiple cycles, it was impossible to save everyone. However, this was the most survivors he had, and he wants to keep pursuing. We see a man watching guard, and he quickly gets his head cut off by Incrid. Incrid says due to the loops, he knows the quantity and locations of the enemy soldiers. If they keep going straight, they will get annihilated by 30 crossbowmen, so they need to turn right here to avoid them. The spearmen who persistently chase them every loop need to be disposed of quickly, or else they will hamper their movements. To avoid the difficult fights, using hit and run ambushes, they escape the enemy's encirclement. We see Andrew killing one of the men. His babysitter says he can tell he is overexerting himself. When it is dark, it will be hard to find the exit. They need to escape while the sun is still up. Ingrid tells them they need to keep going forward, and he asks him why he is going further inside. Ingrid tells him he knows it is the right direction and that he won't accept any disagreements, and to follow him. The babysitter looks pissed. Henry is then surprised as we see him pointing his blade at Ingrid, saying that he should act right, and that he has no plans to follow him to his death. Even if he has to kill him now, he is going to find a way to live. Ingrid says that he himself should know it is too late to turn back. After the commotion they made, their retreat path will have already been swarmed by the enemy. The man asks if he should really follow him, and Ingrid says he wants to make one thing clear, that he wants to survive as well. Andrew thought Ingrid would be some useless trash, just like his father who had given up on everything and just wasted the wealth of his house. But that was not the case. In fact, he reminds him of his mother, as we see her telling Andrew that their house may be finished, but even so, she hopes that he becomes somebody who can lead their people. He needs to earn their trust and rebuild their family. Andrew says he has always wanted to be like her. We can tell by Ingrid's eyes that he is someone who paves the way, as he says to trust him and that they will survive. Andrew steps up, saying that he does trust him, and calls Ingrid captain. His babysitter tries to call out to him, but Andrew says that the captain right now is Ingrid, and that a squad follows the orders of its captain. The babysitter is surprised, and Ingrid tells them to crouch down until he gives the signal and to stay close. The first step to escape is to take the initiative and ambush the enemy to break out of their encirclement. The second step, as we see them all sneaking through the grass, they hear the sound of rustling. They see enemy soldiers walking by them, and there are quite a few passing by their location. Ingrid says the critical point he found out after dozens of loops is that only during this exact time and place can they let the enemy pass by them without trying to start a fight, and that this is the only method they have to actually escape. Everybody sits there nervously waiting. Ingrid focuses his best on listening, and once he hears nobody else, the rest nervously anticipate his call. He says that everything has gone according to his plan, and that the final step is after the sun sets and it becomes dark. The reason they always fail to escape this field is clear. Ingrid tells them they have arrived, and Henry says no way. One of the men starts to facepalm, saying after trying so hard, they ended up being at the enemy camp. Ingrid says that the soldiers of Aspen are killing everybody in the field to silence them because they are hiding something in this field that nobody can know about. We see some kind of shrine in the middle of their camp with flags strung high and bones all over. Ingrid wonders what happens when something more important than catching them occurs. He tells the rest it's time to go and that a way for them to escape will definitely appear as they start walking into the camp. The babysitter asks why he's going to set the enemy camp on fire, saying he's out of his mind, and it's not unlikely that they'll get surrounded and killed. Ingrid finally asks his name, thank God. And we learn that his name is Mac. Ingrid warns him that he will not tolerate disobedience. Mac starts barking, and Andrew tells him to be quiet, and instantly starts following Ingrid's movements. Mac says he doesn't need Andrew to tell him, that they won't be able to find their way out with it being so cloudy in the night. They have no choice but to trust the squad leader. We see Ingrid cut into a tent, and Mac thinks that they're done for, but as soon as they head inside, it's empty. Mac finds it suspicious, that he seems to know so much about this camp. And thinks that he's too reckless going through the enemy camp, but oddly enough, they haven't seen a single enemy soldier despite this. Looking back, they are definitely in their camp, so how is this possible? Ingrid tells them to stop as they finally make it to the shrine, and he tells them all to wait here. Ingrid says that he's infiltrated this camp a dozen times. When he first noticed that flag and touched it, the entire base focused their attention on him. He says what the soldiers wanted to hide is that flag, and protecting that flag is their main objective. He wonders what will happen when the base catches fire. Mac wonders how the hell he knew that the flag was already here, and then starts cooking up a misunderstanding, wondering if the ferry commander told him this, saying that she was the one who appointed this nobody here. Ingrid says that the soldiers will be too busy protecting the flag. The reason why he suddenly took over control of the squad and infiltrated the encampment, maybe it was all to complete a secret mission. Ingrid says that they'll escape while that is going on, and that they'll split into two groups from now on. One group will be bait, drawing the enemies, and the other will start the fire. Max says he'll be with the bait group, and Ingrid is surprised, saying that he's complained constantly but now he's suddenly cooperative, but decides it's better for him. He's dragged the squad into the encampment many times, however he's never had this many people with him until now. Ingrid says that today is the best loop he's had so far, and he thinks that it'll be doable. One of them catches a rock to the head. Then they spot Mac running away and yell to alert the rest, and they start chasing after him. Incrid says that he will succeed. We see him reach towards one of the torches, and he says that this is their best bet at moving to tomorrow, but out of nowhere, an absolute unit appears beside him, and swings down with an ass ton of force, cutting the torch in half. Cold chills runs down Incrid's spine, and he says he didn't even notice this dude. Incrid goes to draw his blade and says he's never seen this guy in any of his other loops, but he can tell this dude is a fucking menace, and he wonders where somebody so strong has come from. The man glares at him, calling him a rat, and Incrid says that they're late. The man wonders what he's talking about, and looks over to see a fire on one of the tents. Some robed guy comes out yelling about it, and then we see the boys running off with barrels. The man tells everybody to put the fires out. Incrid explains that Mac baited away most of the enemies, and he got the attention of the rest while Andrew set the tents on fire. Now he just needs to escape. He stomps his foot on the ground, saying all attacks start from this as he prepares for a thrust. He says to kick against the ground to propel his body forward, and go for the gap in this man's defense as he starts thrusting his sword towards the man while he is distracted. The man instantly turns his head around, locking eyes with Incrid, and then avoids the attack with no wasted movements. He instantly gets behind Incrid before he could even react. Incrid realizes this is bad as he just got cut on his stomach. He leans over, holding onto it, and says that was the best stab he could have done. He turns back and looks at the man who calls him weak, and Incrid can feel the sheer gap in skill, saying that he can't beat him, at least not at his current skill. He barely managed to get here after all of the ambushes through the fields, loop by loop, with everybody dying except for him. He finally thought he had beaten the challenges of this loop and could continue, but now he realizes that this man is the real wall of this loop. As the man raises his sword, Incrid says that if he's going to die, then he says that then he'll have to take over the control of the squad and repeat this over and over to get the chance to fight this man. He begins to laugh, which surprises the man at first. Then he starts to get pissed, asking him why he's laughing. Incrid points his sword at him while smiling, and the man says that he's going to cut him up and feed him to the dogs and starts to swing at Incrid. Incrid lowers his stance and readies his weapon, saying that he will overcome this wall. Incrid manages to block the attack as we see sparks flying from their collision. The man starts to parry his attack, causing it to slide down his blade. Incrid is surprised. The man takes the chance to go in for a quick follow-up and swings. Incrid sidesteps it, but the man is relentless as he instantly goes for another. Incrid manages to dodge that too, surprised that he swung from that position. But the man's onslaught isn't over. Incrid looks up at the blade and somehow manages to block it. He can feel the power behind it. He realizes that he has no opportunity to counterattack. There's too huge of a gap in terms of skill. Incrid does his best to create some distance and takes out one of his throwing knives, launching it towards the man. As it gets close, the man simply raises his arm to deflect it with the back of his hand. Incrid didn't expect that. The man instantly closes the gap once more, stabbing straight for Incrid's chest. He hears his men yelling about the fire spreading, and we see the blade go by Incrid's face as the man was distracted. All over the shrine is now on fire, and it is heading towards the flag. The robed man from earlier calls out to his commander, asking if he doesn't understand what's at stake here. The commander realizes that Incrid won't go down without a fight, and that he has no fear in his eyes. He calls out to him, telling him that he will see him again, and begins to walk away. Incrid is surprised that he's backing off so easily, wondering if maybe he was not the true wall, saying that even if he wasn't, he'll need to overcome this loop, and that he can still improve from here. He hears Andrew calling out to him, saying that they need to go now. Incrid turns back to glance at the commander, as Andrew continues yelling. The commander turns, making eye contact with Incrid who wants to fight him, but instead sheathes his blade, realizing that the best call here is to escape with their lives. And he yells to retreat as we see the men doing their best to put out the fire on the shrine. They start to alert everybody for help. As the boys run out, Incrid says, one of the guys who went that way disappeared, and there are only 5 of them left in the squad now. Mac asks if this is all, and if they are going to send a pursuit force after them. Incrid says no. They hear Henry coughing, and as he's beginning to slow down, a small group of soldiers begins to chase after them. The boys instantly turn to defend Henry, and Incrid finishes his enemy by cutting his head off. Mac stabs one in the throat, and Andrew copies Incrid. Incrid tells the rest not to hesitate and keep running. As we see Andrew grab onto Henry, he says that they won't be able to follow them if they keep running towards the habitat of the field fox and snake. Andrew asks if that will make it harder for them too, and Henry smiles, saying that he knows a safe route, the hunter's path. Incrid tells him that he trusts him to guide them properly. As they get deeper through the field, Ingrid says he no longer hears the footsteps of the pursuit party behind them. As we see them running, we see a fox watching over them. Thanks to Andrew and Mac's efforts, they were able to get rid of them pretty easily. If it wasn't for Henry's pathfinding, they wouldn't have been able to lose them quickly either. It took the efforts of every squad member to get this far. The sun begins to rise, and Ingrid blocks the light with his eyes as he looks up, seeing that he has made it to the next day. They continue running through the fields, making it back to their camp. One of the men asks what happened to them. As we see them all bloodied and gassed out, Henry says he feels like he's about to pass out. Then we hear him slump onto the floor. Ingrid cracks his back, saying that he's finally got through that loop, with most of them alive. Now he can continue his days. It jumps to the shrine as we see the flag is still intact, but that everything else is damaged. One of the men asks the robed guy what happened, and he says that they need to prepare it again. He didn't expect the famous Grey Dog to be unable to stop a few small fry. As we see one of the company commanders named Grey Dog, he says he can't understand what happened, as the soldiers stationed here were the best of the best. Yet a few enemy soldiers broke through, set fire, and escaped. The Grey Dog is an independent company, pretty much private contractors. It is derived from the Grey Dog that resides within the Principality of Aspen. Having a persistent temperament, it has a need to connect with whatever target it has decided upon. Whether it be alone or in a war, therefore the company with the name of Grey Dog is also called the Persistent Lovers. Yeah, I don't get what they're doing with this one. Grey Dog asked the man from earlier if the one he faced was strong, and we learn that his name is Mitch Hurrier. I hardly know her. Mitch says if it wasn't for the fire, he would have easily finished him off. Grey Dog says he got lucky then, and that luck is a skill in itself. Mitch tells him that it will not happen again, and we see Ingrid inside his tent, saying that it bugs him that he faced that wall but couldn't get over it, and that he wanted to keep fighting him. And Ingrid says that soon eventually they'll have to fight again, as we see Mitch as well, determined to kill him the next time they meet. We see Rem throwing his axe through the air, saying that he's bored as hell and that Ingrid should be returning from the recon soon, wondering why there's no news from him. He catches his axe and sits up in the bed, wondering if maybe he died. He says while he got better recently, he's still a small fry, so it would not be surprising if he did. It doesn't happen often, but he actually liked him, and sighs, saying that there's nothing he can do if he's dead. We see Ragnar waking up as well, and he looks over at Rem, who's in a weird pose, and he asks him what the hell he's staring at. Rem waves good morning to him, and Ragnar returns with his own wave. Rem begins to grin, saying that he thinks he wants to kill him, while holding onto his axes. Ragnar starts to unsheath his blade, calling him a crazy dog. It jumps to the ferry company leader. She starts asking Ingrid about his scout mission, asking how he happened to burn the whole place down. He tells her that he continued to make the best possible choices in that situation and got lucky. She makes eye contact with him while saying the words lucky, and then says, alright, telling him to rest and recover. She had hoped that he would achieve something, but she didn't expect anything this big, wondering who exactly he is. As Ingrid goes to leave, he says that he has no idea what she's thinking. We see Andrew calling out to him and then bowing, saying that he's sorry for acting out in the beginning, and he's alive, thanks to him. Wondering if they'll meet again. Ingrid waves, saying that maybe if their paths cross, and he begins to walk away. Andrew grabs his sword and bows to Ingrid, and the rest follow his lead, paying their respects. He says that he managed to bring back 4 of them but wonders if that was really his best, saying that he ended up losing 2 of the members and if he were a little stronger, he would have saved them too. With all the loops, he is capable of exceeding his limits. Eventually, he'll be done with his desperate struggling and strive towards his true goal of becoming a knight. He'll use his loops as a stepping stone for just that purpose, and to prevent repeating the same day over and over, he needs to become much stronger. He hears his squad yelling that they're back at it again, and we see sparks flying as both Ragnar and Rem are trading blow for blow. Both of them are making very serious expressions compared to when they usually duel, and Ingrid says he's never seen this before. He sparred with them countless times yet never seen them make this expression. One of the men says that they aren't even human, calling them animals, and Ingrid says he guesses that they never needed to go all out against him. So he needs to get his priorities straight, and that he needs to have them make those same faces when he spars them. We see Ragnar blocking Rem's attack, and then he glances over, spotting Ingrid. Rem tells him that he's got to report back to them if he's home, asking why he's hiding again. He starts yelling at the rest, saying if they're not going to fight him, then to run off. Ragnar comments on Ingrid being injured, and he tells him that it's just a little scratch. Ingrid goes to ask about their techniques, but Rem instantly tells him to just go wash up and rest. Incrid decides to ask Ragna about it instead, asking the same thing, and Ragna asks if he's seriously asking this right now, and Incrid asks if it's a bad time. Ragna turns his head, saying it's nothing, and Incrid says it sounds like he has something to say but decides he'll tell him later if he wants to. We see everybody packing up the tents as the battalion commander began to move the entire group closer to the tall grass field. Incrid's wounds healed significantly through the trip, and he constantly reflected on his entrained. We see the red-haired guy asking him if he's training, and saying that they're moving out tomorrow, asking why he doesn't rest. He tells him that he'll just be going out for a little bit. Rem clicks his tongue, saying that if he keeps doing this, he's going to die soon and he needs to rest. The next morning, Ragna wakes up to the sound of somebody swinging their sword and sees Incrid's bed is already made and that he must be training. He starts stretching and grabs his sword, saying that he is good with his sword and getting stronger wasn't difficult, and he had a chance to become a knight. But we see him saying that it was boring and that there's nothing he wanted to do as a knight, asking why he would spend his time and energy on it. That he couldn't find meaning, so he lost his purpose, and that's why he's here in this squad. He begins to watch Incrid swing his sword. We hear Incrid grunting in pain as he swings and falls to his knees as we see that he still hasn't fully recovered from his fight. Ragna comments on how his fundamentals are all wrong, and that you need to learn them properly when you start. With all the shortcuts to make up for his shitty fundamentals, it'll be impossible for him to get stronger. But Incrid grabs his sword, and we see his eyes are full of determination, and Ragna wonders why he's putting his body through so much pain, trying so hard. He decides to ask him the same question, and Incrid tells him it's because he wants to get stronger. Ragna asks what he'll do when he does, and Incrid tells him that he'll become a knight. Ragna tells him that a knight is just somebody who fights well, asking if it has that much meaning to him. Incrid says that the knight he aspires to be is someone who decides for himself what is right, and raises his sword for honor, for the sick and the poor, and to protect those he loves. Ragna is surprised that he's doing it for honor and merit, and says that strength is just a tool, since a knight is just a sword, and starts to think about what he wants to do. He walks forward, saying that he won't know until he figures it out, and he calls out to Incrid, asking him if he would like to learn the sword. Incrid says of course. And then Ragna stares at him blankly, and sighs, saying that he should not have said that, and he's already getting lazy. But still, based on how determined Incrid looks, it might be interesting. He says that Rem already taught him the intestines of the beast or something, right? Incrid corrects him, saying it's called the heart of the beast. Ragna says that he needs to get rid of anything that is not that or his stab. Incrid asked about the Valen mercenary sword technique. And he says, especially that if he doesn't ditch that, even if he learns a new technique, he will revert to his old habits, and in that case, he might as well give up. And he tells him to choose, either ditch everything, and start fresh, or just be complacent. Incrid instantly says that he'll start fresh, and Ragna, surprised by how fast he replied, asking him if he's sure about this. And Incrid asked what he needs to do first. Ragna says that this guy really is not normal. And while he has a good physique, he wields too light of a weapon, and he should find something heavier, and hands him his blade. Incrid asks if he should really be handing his sword over like that. And Ragna says it doesn't matter as it's not special, and tells him how to properly grip the sword by having his right hand above his left. He then notices he's squeezing tightly, asking why. Incrid says so he doesn't lose his blade. And Ragna asks him who taught him this. And he says Rem did. Ragna clicks his tongue, calling him a useless bastard, and tells him to get into his position. He then raises the sword above his head, and swings it down on Incrid. He blocks it, and we can see his hands shaking. And he says that shit hurt, asking why he did that. Ragna says of course it would hurt. And if he stiffens up, it's only going to get worse, and says he's essentially like a branch or a column or something like that. Incrid wonders why everybody in his squad talks like this, asking if that's a metaphor, and what that's even meant to mean. He wonders if it means that he's too stiff because he's clenching the sword too tightly. Incrid says he probably means to say that he needs to stay flexible with the sword to keep his sword from breaking, and he needs his movements to be more malleable. He then loosens his grip, and then we hear Ragna slash his sword a couple more times. And then he kicks Incrid's feet out from under him, telling him to pay attention to his balance. Incrid tries again, and he asks him where his feet are pointed. And then smacks his sword, saying it's too stiff, telling him to try again, asking him if he's trying to break his wrist. We see Incrid go for an attack, and Ragna taunts him, asking if he was trying to dance. This continues on throughout the day until we see Incrid on the ground. Ragna sighs, saying he did not realize it was this shit, and that Incrid has none of the basics down, and that it's not something that can be taught. We see Incrid gassed out, but he tightens the grip on his sword. Ragna stares at him, and then thinks about something. And Incred asks if they can go again. Ragna sighs, and draws his blade, telling him that they should start with the baby steps. We then hear Rem asking where they have been all day, asking if they are playing picnic here, skipping meals and shit. And he points at Ragna, asking Incred if he's giving him a hard time, asking if he wants him to take care of him. They start their typical banter, and Incred asks if there's something going on, because Rem is dressed up. Rem tells him that it's because they're being summoned. As the enemy forces are gathering in the distance, we see everybody preparing for combat. And it jumps to the ferry commander standing on a cliff above all the soldiers, as well as Incred's entire squad suited up for battle. Ragna wonders if teaching him was a mistake, saying that he's still new to the technique so he probably can't fight all that well. And then he might die because of that today. He puts his sword on his shoulder, saying that he's definitely going to need to babysit him today. Incred wishes that he had more time to practice. Some of the soldiers start asking why the enemy's formation looks like that. As we see that flag from the camp, and that they are all spread out in a very specific pattern. As the robed man stretches his hand out, saying this is the end. A strong gust of wind suddenly starts to form from where he's standing. And the ferry commander realizes that it's a spell. All the soldiers fight to maintain their posture as a fog envelops everybody. Incred looks around, saying he can't even see the people next to him. A lot of the soldiers start to panic due to the fog, and Incred hears something. All the other soldiers hear it too, and wonder what that noise is. They start to panic, and Incred yells, telling them all that it's arrows. As we see them coming down like rain. They start impaling the soldiers, hitting them all over. The fairy queen starts to deflect them, saying the fog is not normal, and nobody could have expected them to use this tactic. She yells, telling everybody to raise their shields. And she realizes they've been had. The robed man begins to laugh, saying it was so difficult to get this spell together. He had to offer up the blood of many animals, while collecting a ton of water by casting rain spells. And once the spell is active, the fog will obscure all vision. Unless you're under the casting point of the spell, which is the flags, it's going to be a one-sided battle. And he calls it the fog of annihilation. We hear Mitch telling him that he looks satisfied. The man says of course, if it wasn't for that flag almost burning down, this would have been a cakewalk. And Mitch thinks about Incred, calling him an asshole, as we see him doing his best to endure the arrows. The second barrage of arrows starts to come in, and we see Incred evade one. He hears a voice behind him telling him to keep his head down, and he recognizes it as Ragna. Then we hear Rem say that this is a spell, and he's pissed. Incred says that he's right in front of his eyes but can't identify him, and he won't be able to fight properly like this. An arrow lands directly at his feet, and he says that his breath is getting strained and his body is getting stiff, making it hard for him to move his legs as he needs to. This means he can't use anything he's learned from Ragna at this rate, and he didn't expect to get it on the first try. Back to training, Ragna says that he'll revert back to his old habits for now, even if he learns from him. It would be best not to fight until he finishes learning what he's about to teach him. However, unless he fights on the battlefield, he'll die regardless. He realizes that's right and then closes his eyes, relocking in, saying that death to him does not hold the same weight as it does to others. As all the soldiers continue fighting around him, Ragna tells him to get behind him, but he says that he found a way. If he can't do it in one try, he knows what he must do. He charges straight into the fog. Ragna calls out to him, asking if he's crazy. A spearman comes from the fog, thrusting his spear forward and stabbing Incred directly through the throat. Incred lets out a groan as we see it impaled into him. He then starts to smile, saying that now he can go back to learning from Ragna. The soldier starts to get scared, calling him crazy. He pulls his spear out of Incred's throat, causing him to die on the spot. Back at the camp, Ragna is asking him if he really understood what he said. Incred replies that, to be frank, Ragna is not a great teacher. To a genius like him, it's also obvious that it's hard for him to put what's wrong into words. Ragna says maybe this is what they mean about understanding it but not being able to put it into practice. He just asks him to swing his sword downwards, asking if that's too hard. Incred says he's not making fun of him, he's genuinely confused and asks where his center of gravity should be. Ragna is surprised but starts to think about it, asking if he means something like this. Incred confirms that's as he thought. He says that guys like him don't even know how they do what they do. While Ragna's explanations are lacking, it's not that big of a deal, since observing and listening are some of Incred's strong suits. He'll remember his stance no matter how many times it takes. Back to the barrage of arrows coming in. Incred raises his blade, deflecting one of them. But his hands start shaking, and he realizes he's still too stiff. Another spear is thrust forward, and Incred doesn't even dodge it, saying it's okay, so he can just die and continue learning. So he takes it to the throat. Back to training. We see him moving his feet as he dodges underneath Ragna's blade. He says this is now the 31st loop, and he is capable of flexible movement. Ragna tells him that the step he took is pretty good, asking where he learned it, and with that he should be able to start learning the basics already. Ragna explains that the 3 basics with a sword are cutting, stabbing, and slashing. He needs to use the edge of the blade for defense, and if the sword is good quality, he can also use the sides. The shortest distance between the opponent and him is called the line of attack. Using the sword is all about blocking the opponent's line while extending his own. He tells him to draw his opponent in and reach out to him with his sword. Back to the battlefield. The spearman is thrusting forward. Incred watches as it grazes past him and he thinks that his feet are light, so he can easily dodge this. Then 4 more spears are thrust out in front of him, immediately killing him on the spot. He says that little by little, his loops are starting to change. We see him actually parrying Ragna's sword, which surprises Ragna, who asks if he really just parried that. Incred is determined, saying that even though it's only a little bit at a time, he will make sure to continue this cycle. As he does a diagonal slash at Ragna, Ragna says that it no longer needs work. He seems a little surprised. Incred claims that even though they're baby steps, they're still adding up to be long strides. As he's running forward in the smoke, Ragna calls out to him, asking if he is crazy. Only for him to die once more, smiling and saying that as long as he can achieve steady progress, he'll die as many times as he needs. We see Ragna raising his blade as he swings down towards Incred. Incred ducks forward while bringing his blade up, successfully countering Ragna's attack and knocking it away. Incred states that it is now the 100th loop. Ragna is looking at his blade in complete disbelief and then looks back down at Incred, asking him what the hell his deal is and who he is, since he can no longer recognize his captain's movements. Incred says that Ragna no longer looks at him the same, and he thought he couldn't improve much more with his talent. As he's running in, Ragna calls out to him again, but Incred continues marching forward, saying that he has surpassed his previous level. We see him dodge the first spear as he follows it closely. He completely runs past the enemy soldier without killing him, as he has a goal in mind, the road to becoming a knight. As he charges directly into the back line of the spearmen, they thrust forward, impaling him yet again. He starts to smile through death, saying that this is so fun he might actually go insane. Back at the training camp, Ragna calls out to him, asking if he wants to learn the sword once more. Incred replies that he'll do whatever he can to become stronger, smiling and ready to die as many times as it takes to achieve his goal. Ragna says there's no way he'd be this good, as he's confused, asking if he's been fighting like shit on purpose until now. Incred says that's not it, but Ragna continues, saying that he's got all the basics down and it seems like he only needs experience if anything else right now. Back to the battlefield, as the arrows come in, Incred says that he has now been on this loop for 200 attempts. An arrow flies directly towards his head, and we see him firmly plant his heel into the ground as he leans forward, ducking underneath the arrow. Saying that he plans to see how far the techniques he has learned will take him today. The typical spearman thrusts forward, but he ducks under it, retaliating by swinging his blade forward, cutting the man's arms and head off. Incred says he knows where the enemies will pop out from beyond the fog. He pulls out one of his throwing knives, saying that he can get a few of them even if he can't see them, as he throws it forward, killing one of the enemy soldiers. As they begin to panic, we see one of them looking around in the fog, wondering what the hell is going on as he can't see anybody. He then immediately gets his leg lobbed off by Incred. Some of the crossbowmen start to panic, wondering what's going on. One of them raises his crossbow, getting ready to fire. Incred remembers Ragna telling him that he needs to look with his eyes and predict what will happen, and then move with his feet in accordance. As Incred ducks underneath the crossbowman's weapon, piercing him through the chest with his blade, Incred starts to laugh, saying this shit is hitting different and it feels like he's an entirely different person compared to when he didn't even have the basics down. He starts to charge deeper into the enemy lines, saying that he needs more and more people to come at him. He gets a little further until multiple crossbowmen all raise their weapons. As they're setting up the firing squad, one of them says that he's done well infiltrating up to here, asking him how he plans to make it out of this alive. As we see Incred panting, he steps forward, saying that he wants to fight it out with swords like men as he continuously plans on testing himself. They call him crazy and then immediately disrespect his request by unleashing crossbow bolts, killing him on the spot. We then jump back to the boatman as he's calling Incred foolish, saying that he's walked into his own grave, asking if he is all there upstairs, calling his mental cooked. He then wakes up surprised, saying he hasn't seen that in a while, and he wonders if the boatman really came out of nowhere just to shit-talk him. Rem then asks what he's doing as he sees that he's blanking out. Incrid then remembers something about Rem, saying that he called it a spell when it happened. In the enemy's formation, it looked as if they were guarding the flag back in the grass fields on his last outing. He then asks Rem if he knows anything about spells. Rem asks why he's so curious all of a sudden, and Incrid says that he just thought it might be interesting to tell him what he knows. Rem says sure, asking if he knows the difference between magic and spells. Incrid says that magic is more common, and Rem says that is not wrong, that a spell requires a medium. It's not just that it requires it, but the medium is a whole lot more important, as spells cannot exist without them. Incrid thinks about it, saying that the fog was due to the enemy's spell and that flag must have been the medium. Therefore, if the flag breaks, the fog will leave. Incrid asks him if his tribe also used spells since he knows they originated from the west and that is where Rem is from. Rem smiles, saying that he's seen them, asking if he knew that there aren't many actual spellcasters, as most of them are hex casters. Incrid ignores him, and Rem asks him where he's going. Incrid tells him that he's going to train. Ragna says that it looks like they both have the same training background, asking if he knows what the Unyuk sword technique is. We get some lore and we learn about 500 years ago there was 1 in a million prodigy. A child born on a sword farm slayed 12 bandits that attacked the farm with nothing but a fireplace poker. Having lost his parents early, he learned the sword at a young age, and a noble having heard the rumors took him in. That prodigy went by the name of Leonis Unyuk. However, as gifted as he was also cursed. He began losing strength as a 10-year-old and became fully paralyzed at 12. And just like that, the Mist Runes prodigy was lost to history. Rem says that at the age of 20, Leonis fully paralyzed and immortalized himself in the history of swordsmanship, completing all the sword techniques in the land and categorizing them into 5 categories: the righteous elaborate sword, the heavy strong sword, the flowing confounding sword, the fast swift sword, and the gentle parrying sword. Leonis rewrote the history of the sword, and with this, the Unyuk family became the greatest house in the empire. The after effects of this technique can still be felt, as it is the foundation of all swordsmanship today. Ragna says that there is the northern heavy sword and a bunch of other sword techniques, including some eastern techniques that utilize ki. And among those, the technique he developed branches off of the northern heavy sword. He tries to think about what Rem taught him, asking if it was called the conscience of the beast. Incrid corrects him, saying it's called the heart of the beast. And Ragna says that this will be more useful than that, and it's called concentrate on a single point. He needs to forget everything around him and focus only on his own sword and the enemies, and he'll show him how it works as he starts to get in a stance. Incrid wonders what's about to happen as Ragna thrusts his blade directly towards him, nicking the side of his throat. Incrid is surprised, saying that it was faster than Rem's axe, and he nearly just died. Ragna then asks if he felt anything, and we hear Rem calling him a degenerate, asking if he's really trying to kill the squad leader. Ragna says that people concentrate better in the face of death, and he's just trying to help him out. Rem says that he can't learn anything if he's dead, asking if he even knows how long it took for him to learn the heart of the beast. Ragna says that's only natural for a stupid barbarian teaching him, and they start to argue. Incrid says that both of them are pretty shit at teaching, though. Rem then says that his people are more north than his, saying that truly that means he's more barbaric. Ragna says no, as he knows Rem is from the southern barbarian tribe. As they continue bantering, Incrid tells them that's enough, and they should leave, as he is here for the departure order. Ragna then reminds Incrid to remember how alert he was just now, saying that moments before death, if he succeeds with concentrating on a single point, everything around him will fade, and he will feel his sword do his bidding. Back at the battlefield, Incrid says that it's similar to the heart of the beast yet completely different. The heart of the beast makes you numb in the face of death, but the other makes you more alert, and he needs to experience it in real life or he needs more experience with it. He looks up at the battlefield, seeing the flag. As the fog starts rolling in, Incrid says that he'll add another objective on top of gaining experience, and that is for him to actually take out the flag. He starts to march forward, decapitating one of the soldiers, saying that it will be easy for him to get there with both Rem and Ragna. But he plans to do it on his own, as we see him taking down another soldier. He cleanses his blade of the blood, saying that he is hella excited to learn this new technique. Incrid says that he died while unprepared too many times. Which is why concentrate on a single point is very useful. To survive the assassin, he trained his ears. To survive the battlefield, he learned the heart of the beast. But concentrating on a single point, he does not truly understand. Ragna thrusts his blade forward, directly towards him. It stops just shy of his face, asking if he understands. Saying if he succeeded, he should have felt the tip of the blade slow down or something. Incred shakes his head no, wondering if maybe the heart of the beast is interfering with it. But he doesn't think that's the case. Ragna tells him that he should feel everything else fade besides the opponent's sword. And he should be able to predict the sword's path, asking if he's felt anything similar. Incred says that he's starting to think that channeling his fear of death isn't the right move for this, asking him how he learned it. Ragna says he didn't have to learn, as it's something he could always do. And it's in the name, you just have to concentrate on a single point. Incred sighs, saying he's not going to get any useful answers out of him, and he'll just have to figure it out on his own. But he shouldn't get impatient, as he'll keep practicing this on the side, as his first priority is knocking down one of the flags. He plans to minimize the damage to his allies and penetrate straight through the enemy lines. As the fog starts rolling in again, everybody panics, but Incred yells, telling them to get down. They immediately follow his command, and he tells them to raise their shields. As arrows start to fly in, we see their shields blocking the volleys as he takes charge. He's repeated this loop over 300 times. He knows where the attacks will come from, even if his eyes were closed. Even the enemy soldiers are confused by the fog, so he takes advantage of it, slipping past one, immediately stabbing him in the side of the head, and then following through with a swing, killing 2 more soldiers. The enemy starts to scream, saying that it's just one guy and they can take care of him. As they see the shadowy figures of their comrades getting bodied, another group gets close to Incred, and he rears his sword back, immediately getting rid of them, as he has one goal in mind, and that is the flag. One of the soldiers yells, telling everybody to get a hold of themselves, and they need to stop him. Incred smiles as he gets closer, as he's actually enjoying this. He swings down his sword as the enemy soldier blocks it in front of him, creating sparks. But Incred doesn't let this stop him, as he uses pure brute force swinging downward, breaking the sword in half. Then using the soldier's body, he slams him into the pole, breaking it. He says that it took him 10 loops to get to this flag. As we see it finally break, he says that that is all he wanted. But then he's surprised that the fog still hasn't left. While he gets distracted, the enemy soldiers take advantage of it, stabbing him. One of them laughs, saying it seems like he knows a little about spells, but that he has been deceived. Incred now understands what's going on, saying that there must only be one real flag, and every other one is merely a decoy, and that he needs to find the real one among them. The loop restarts, as Ragna asks what he's doing, because Incred is charging straight in, all alone. He says he has a 1 in 5 chance of getting it on the next try. As he takes the lead, he yells, telling everybody to get down and raise their shields, but they can't hear him as he's too far, and they wonder what to do. Incred turns, watching the arrows fly over him, completely confused. As he raises his shield, he blocks the ones in front of him, but all of his soldiers start to get clapped, and he wonders why they didn't listen like they did last time, saying maybe it's the timing, or maybe he needs to give them time to catch their breaths. He breaks another flag, only for it to be a fake, as he gets his head cut off immediately after. Now with 4 left, we see him break another one, yet it was still, again, a fake, as the soldiers killed him once more. That took him 5 extra loops. The 4th flag took him 7 extra loops to get there, and even after he broke it, it was still the same fate. He only has 2 flags left, and he says that if he were to trust his gut on which one is real, there's only one clear winner here, as it would have to be the one that is the furthest away from the rest. We see right beside it is the robed man from the camp. Incred kneels, telling everybody to get down and raise their shields, and they actually listen this time. The arrows get blocked once more, and Incred tells Rem to follow him. Rem asks if he's out of his mind, as they start to charge into the arrows. Incred says even if it's far away, he can't get exhausted before he reaches the flag. As they charge into the spearmen, Incred doesn't even bother swinging since Rem is with him. He takes out the man by throwing his axe. Incred says the plan is to get Rem to draw their attention, and he'll slide past them. Rem picks up the soldier, asking him who cast the spell, but realizes the dude has his brains on the ground, so he throws him away, saying that he'll just have to hear it from the next guy. He continues killing the enemies. Incred says it's been over a year of him repeating this loop. He runs closer to the flag and readies his blade, saying now it'll be the end of the fog. And then as soon as he goes to swing, his sword gets stopped. As we hear a familiar voice asking if this is a dream. As it's none other than Mitch, who knocks his blade away from the flag. Mitch says that God has answered his prayers. as he says that he has really wanted to kill him with his own hands, and he's been waiting for this moment. Ingrid glares at him, but it's solely because he doesn't remember who the hell he is. Mitch is a bit taken aback and then starts to get angry, asking how the hell he forgot about him in only a few days. But Ingrid is confused, since for him it's been so long. Ingrid asks Mitch who he is. Mitch says that he'll remember as he readies his blade, charging forward, saying that maybe being stabbed will jog his memory. Ingrid watches as the blade comes close, so he turns his chest to the side to dodge it. He then pushes off the ground with his back foot, thrusting forward, trying to counter Mitch. Mitch quickly backpedals and wonders what's going on. As Ingrid has changed so much in just the last few days, he says that he's gotten incomparably better. He starts to get pissed that he tried to catch him with a single step. While he's lost in thought, Ingrid charges in, closing the gap. He swings down at Mitch, who blocks it, creating sparks from their blades. Ingrid says that he is loyal to the basics, using the righteous sword technique, and he's mixing in the flowing sword technique, which deflects attacks. Our boy is learning as he fights. Mitch begins to push him back, but Ingrid doesn't allow him as he knocks his sword backwards, saying he needs to focus all of his senses in front of him. Mitch raises his blade, thrusting forward. Ingrid says if he gets distracted for a single moment, the balance will collapse, so he has to make sure to actually lock in. He needs to forget the flag, the outcome, and even sword techniques as everything else needs to fade around him, leaving only the swords behind. As they both swing towards one another, the tips of their swords clash. Mitch grits his teeth and pushes as hard as he can, knocking Ingrid's sword backwards. Ingrid is surprised, but before he can even retaliate, Mitch thrusts his sword directly through his chest, fatally injuring Ingrid. He starts to cough while impaled by Mitch's blade, and he looks up at Mitch, saying that he remembers him. He was the guy blocking the flagpole in the grass. Mitch introduces himself, saying he is the Aspen Principality's Greyhound Squad platoon commander. Ingrid introduces himself as well, saying that he is the Nalilia Kingdom Squad commander. Some of the soldiers ask Mitch if he is an enemy, and Mitch says yes, and his specialty is hiding. One of his men says that Ingrid sure is an odd guy, and when Mitch looks back down at him, he is confused, asking Ingrid what is wrong with him and why he is smiling. Ingrid says that Ragna is a crazy bastard, and it wasn't the concentration that comes from the fear of dying that was necessary. Rather, what he needed was a good rival. He needed an opponent that would put everything on the line to fight and encourage him. He wonders if maybe he was low-key just a freak, and he pulls his blade out of his chest, saying he ain't trying to match that. Back to Ragna explaining the concentrate on a single point again. Ingrid looks to the side, saying that he sees, and Ragna mistakes it as him not listening and maybe giving up. Rem approaches, saying that they've been called to head out. Ingrid tells Ragna it's time to go. Ragna then says he actually looks like he's more full of energy and he sure is a weird person today and that he should maybe go a little harder during warm-up. As the fog starts to roll in, Ingrid yells, telling everybody to get down and raise their shields. The volley of arrows then starts to fly in. And before Rem can say his usual line, Ingrid cuts him off, saying to follow him. Rem asks what he's doing, and Ragna says that he'll be coming as well. Rem starts barking at him, asking if maybe he took an arrow to the head, saying he's being weird. Ragna tells him if he doesn't want to have an arrow lodged into his head, he needs to look forward as the enemies are right in front of them, and we see Ingrid running in between the enemy lines. But the same can't be said for Ragna and Rem as they have to brute force their way forward. Ingrid says he really wanted to make sure that he could open the path in a similar way to before and meet Mitch once more, and they start to have their stare down. Ingrid then starts to give off some psycho energy, saying it's nice to see him, calling him his friend, saying they should fight. Mitch asks if he really came looking for him, and Ingrid asks if this is his first time receiving a confession, saying that he came because he fell in love at first sight. Mitch says that usually he is the one finding people, and this is the first time somebody else has come looking for him. Ingrid asks him if he's upset, and Mitch readies his blade, saying nonsense. Ingrid starts to explain that entering the state of concentration where he can only feel the sword once more is a lot harder than he thought as we see him get stabbed to the chest. Mitch says he didn't think he'd lose this easily, and he doesn't know why he made him believe that he could fight him. Ingrid now realizes that his attitude was wrong, and it can't be intentional as he needs to be absorbed into the fight naturally. As he's clashing blades once more with Mitch, he says that he'll just repeat the fight over and over until he can find that feeling. Finally, on the 18th loop, everything else but the sword starts to fade, and he can feel it again. In his 28th loop of fighting Mitch, he can intentionally enter the state of concentration. By the 48th loop of meeting Mitch, We see Ragna saying that he'll teach him the tricks as he readies his blade, thrusting forward at Incrid like usual, but Incrid this time is locked in as he's staring at the blade, solely focusing on it. As he gets closer and closer to his eye, everything else begins to fade, and right when the moment arises, he raises his blade, actually deflecting Ragna's attack, leaving Ragna speechless. Then he asks him if he just deflected his attack by concentrating on a single point, asking how. Incrid doesn't say it aloud but thinks that it's pure concentration that means completely controlling his body and sword. His power and technique have developed to the point where he cannot compare them to before he met Mitch. Ragna asks him where he's going as he starts to leave, then Incrid says it's time to meet the platoon commander. Incrid says it is finally time for him to overcome this loop once and for all. It jumps to the ferry commander asking what he wants. Incrid says that he remembers that he saw something about spells during his reconnaissance. She wonders what he means, and he continues, saying that the Aspen soldiers were calling a weird-looking man the spellcaster. She seems more interested, telling him to elaborate. He says that he told her everything that might be needed to win the battle, and it jumps straight back to the fog rolling in. Incrid commands his men yet again and begins to charge in, leaving Rem and Ragna behind him. He says that he just has to hope that his commander is competent because all he has to do is focus on what's in front of him as we see Mitch by the flag. He says that his goal is to overcome him. Mitch recognizes him, but Incrid then says his name, which surprises Mitch that he knows it. Incrid says that he wanted to fight it out with him from the very start and that today he plans on beating him as he charges straight in. He swings down at Mitch, who sidesteps it. He then rotates his hips, swinging his blade forward. Incrid reacts in time and turns his blade sideways, bracing it with his arm to block Mitch's attack. Mitch is actually surprised by how sturdy he is. Incrid then thrusts forward with his sword. Mitch narrowly blocks it, and he swings forward, knocking Incrid's sword back. They collide once more, creating sparks. Mitch then asks him if maybe he was hiding his skills, and Incrid says yes. Mitch then asks his name, and Incrid tells him. Then they begin trading blow for blow. Mitch tells him that he will remember the name, and Incrid says there is no need as he will remind him if he forgets. He then starts to lock in, focusing solely on Mitch's blade. He notices that Mitch's balance is shifting to his right foot as he is preparing to slash diagonally. Incrid sidesteps it, saying that he has learned this from all of the loops, and the experiences gained through repetition all culminate to allow him to see his movements. They both thrust directly towards each other's necks, barely grazing one another, as we see they both drew blood. Mitch then looks down to see Incrid actually following through with this swing, and he narrowly dodges by ducking underneath. He says that he really thought he would get him in a couple of moves, and he wonders why he is struggling against someone like this. He grits his teeth out of pure anger, saying that his righteous and flowing sword techniques are suited for parrying, so he needs to get a proper attack in. Now Mitch says that he will use his ultimate technique that he has learned to remedy that. He stomps forward and starts to swing his blade diagonally, saying that it is an attack that starts from the bottom and slashes in a huge arc. It is called the will cut. Incrid watches as Mitch prepares this heavy swing, and he starts to see the actual line. He says that he has died to this technique so many times because he couldn't see where and when it started. But now is not the case. As the blade starts to come up, he smiles, saying that he is so glad he gets to see it again. As they collide swords, Incrid actually manages to parry the will cut. Mitch's heart sinks, asking how the hell he saw it and parried it. We learn more about Mitch's family. It is one of the three main houses that reign over the Aspen Kingdom. House Hurrier represented the brute force of the kingdom and recruited any and all people who showed talent in the sword. He was also recruited from a regional house to that end. After adopting the name Hurrier, he proved himself with his skills and fought 2 adult knights at the age of 15. He won against a champion swordsman of a town at 18 and was strong enough to become the champion of an entire city at 22. He became one of the 3 best fighters in the Greyhounds through his skill alone. There were only a few that matched up to his talents. As we see him watching people train, he wonders why they put so much effort into it. Asking why it's so necessary to swing a sword until your hand bleeds, as it only takes a few swings for him to understand things. He was satisfied with the present, and he was emboldened by his skill, which was a mistake on his part from being complacent. Incrid starts to capitalize on the fact that Mitch lost balance and quickly stabs forward, piercing Mitch's shoulder, completely dominating the fight now. Mitch tries to find some way out of it, but Incrid quickly pulls the blade out, readying himself once more. Mitch then starts to lean over and spits up blood. Incrid starts to slowly walk towards him, and Mitch realizes that he underestimated him and thought that his attack would definitely get him. He says that Incrid isn't as good as him in strength or technique, and Incred says he's right. But in the end, he still beat his ass. Mitch starts to grit his teeth and realizes that he is right. Incred readies his blade to execute him, telling him that this was fun. Mitch says that if only he tried harder instead of being arrogant and relying solely on his skills. But he hears somebody yelling to protect Mitch. Then he watches as Incred's blade comes in to finish the fight, but someone blocks the attack, as we see it's none other than the Grey Dog, and Incred distances himself. Mitch's men then start to tend to his wound, asking if he is okay, and the Grey Dog tells them to take Mitch somewhere safe. He says he didn't expect one man to cause this mess, and he raises his blade, telling Incred he won't let him have a peaceful death. Incred says that he can't forget that he is surrounded by enemies here as they are in front of him and behind him, ready with crossbows. He says breaking the flag and securing his exit is his goal, aka the wall he must overcome to get out of this loop. His eyes start to focus, and the Grey Dog yells, telling his men to fire, and they all start to unleash their arrows directly towards Incred. Incred charges straight in through the arrows, saying that he can't avoid all the attacks, so he'll take them head on and continue advancing. Grey Dog raises his sword into the air, saying there's no way he's this foolish. He swings down towards Incred, only for it to be blocked. Incred realizes that his sword is cracked from the attack, saying that his technique is extremely heavy. To win this battle, he's going to need to die many more times, but the objective now is to win the battle, which means he needs to destroy the flag. He throws a throwing knife forward, trying to hit the flag, saying that the spell medium will stop working even if it's only slightly damaged. But his wind is moving the flag too much. Grey Dog calls him a bastard and swings at his head. Incred ducks underneath, throwing another dagger and saying that he needs to aim for the connection between the flag and the flagpole. He does exactly that, breaking the top portion of the flag entirely off of the pole. The fog rolls in even thicker than before, and the ferry commander says that she informed the command that there would be a spell and asked for resources to combat it, but they haven't done anything, and the kingdom is hella rotten. They sent a potato of a dude to command the front lines, and at this rate, they're going to be wiped out. She then notices something as she looks to her side. The fog starts to actually disappear. The soldiers are confused, asking what happened to the flag. While they're distracted, the ferry commander immediately stabs one of them in the back, saying that with the fog gone, the enemies have been completely taken by surprise, and now is the chance to change the tide of the battlefield. Now they have the confidence, and they start charging forward. She says that things are more favorable now that the fog is gone, but she wonders who destroyed the spell. She wonders if maybe it was Incred, as we see a couple of arrows lodged into him. He says he messed up. After destroying the flag, he thought he'd run into either Ragna or Rem if he ran straight towards friendly lines, but instead, there are only enemies, and he wonders where the hell they are. Back to Rem, he's holding onto an enemy soldier while barking at the rest, telling them to bring him to the spellcaster or else he will kill them all. Ragna is more lost, as this dude is back at the allied camp, and they all stare at him like he is actually disabled. Ragna sits there for a second, as his brain processes it since it's a bit smooth. He recognizes that they aren't the enemy, and they ask what the hell is wrong with him and if he wants to be executed. Back to Incred, the enemy soldiers call him a rat, asking why he's still trying to survive even in this state. One of them gets close, telling him to just give up as he raises his sword above his head. Before he can swing it down, we see a puma attack from the side, biting the man. Incred immediately recognizes it as the one he met in the tall grass fields, and he makes eye contact with it. The enemy soldiers wonder why a beast is helping him and ready their crossbows. But the puma doesn't give them the chance and immediately jumps straight towards them. It attacks their weapons by breaking the strings in their crossbows. It then walks directly in front of Incred to protect him. Incred tells the puma it should leave, as the man in front of them is a little special, and Grey Dog is utterly pissed. We then hear a familiar voice as he puts his hand on Incred's back, telling him to stand back. It's none other than Vengeance, who walks forward like a badass, saying that he's going to save him. Incred is confused, but Vengeance starts to charge directly in. His attack immediately gets parried by Grey Dog, and he gets sent flying backwards, saying he didn't expect him to actually be strong. Vengeance then tells his boys to just shoot him instead. As we see them firing their crossbows, Grey Dog doesn't stop his charge, starting to knock away the arrows with his sword. While he's distracted, the puma leaps for a surprise attack, but Grey Dog reacts in time by hitting it in the side with his hilt, knocking it to the ground. Incred then starts to lock in, focusing on the tip of Grey Dog's blade. He says he sees it as he follows the line and raises his short sword up in front of him, saying he can't parry that sword with his strength, which means that he'll have to actually use Grey Dog's strength against him. He'll take one out of Mitch's book and let it flow against his blade. He does exactly that, but due to the short length of the blade, he actually gets cut on his arm. But it does work, and Grey Dog is surprised as he instantly recognizes Mitch's technique, asking him where the hell he learned that. Incred lifts his blade, saying it seems like his skills will even work against him. Vengeance then comes in with the greatest attack of all time, obviously having no effect. Grey Dog then looks over, seeing all of the reinforcements running in. He clicks his tongue and turns, telling Incred he won't forget him. Incred tells him to do what he wants, and Grey Dog orders his men that it's time to retreat. Vengeance runs over, telling him that he doesn't have bandages, so they have to move back to wrap up his shoulder. Incred says that they need to bring the puma too, and he picks him up. Vengeance calls him crazy, telling him to worry about himself first. As we see he's actually carrying the puma, Vengeance starts carrying him away, telling his men that it's time to head back. Incred's eyes then start to feel extremely heavy. Vengeance tries to bark at him enough to keep him awake, but he's lost too much blood, so his eyes start to slowly close. The boatman then asks him if he accomplished what he wanted to, calling him a persistent bastard, and asks him what truly drives him while Vengeance and his boys fight to take him back to base. It jumps to a tent. We hear a bunch of people talking about Incred, saying they hope he wakes up without any issues. Incred wonders what's going on as he feels a strange sensation in his hand. When he wakes up, he sees the puma cuddled up to him. Rem asks if he's awake, saying that he really thought he died this time, as we see all the squad members looking at him. Incred asks what's going on, and Jackson asks if he's feeling okay. He says he's thirsty, and Jackson hands him a drink, saying that he's lost a lot of blood. They tell him that, thankfully the medics said there won't be any lasting effects and that the goddess of luck must be on his side. Incred says that he must have passed out during the retreat. Jackson says that now that he's awake, he's going to leave, and Ragna says he's going to sleep. Incred's just glad he got through another day. Rem sits there deep in thought, and Incred asks him why he's staring at him like that, asking if he wants to pet the puma. Rem says no, he's not interested in beasts, and he asks him how he knew it was a spell. Incred says that he won't believe him if he tells him about the repeating days, so he needs to lie to him. But he says that he shouldn't because Rem has always been faithful to him, and he needs to return it in kind. He says that he was friends with someone like him, a settler, and he suspected that based on what he heard from him. In Incred's mind, he says that's a perfect lie, as he did hear it from a settler, which was Rem. Rem sighs, saying it's fine if he doesn't want to tell him. He should just not get himself interested in spells. Incred says he really is really smart despite how he looks, and he asks him what he was doing during the battle. Rem says that he was going to see the asshole who set up the flag, but he didn't like his face, so he sent his head flying. Incred says he was wondering what happened with the spellcaster since he never saw him. Krace tries to hand the puma some food in return for touching its paws, but the puma hisses. Incred says it might rip him to shreds, and Krace says it's worth 10,000 krona. And explains that because of its blue eyes, it's actually called a lake panther, and they're supposed to hold the energy of the lake inside them. Each of its claws is worth over 10,000 krona, and they keep growing new ones. Incred says that a single bronze coin is worth 1 krona, so 10,000 must be worth a gold coin, which is way more than his pay. After he collapsed, they dominated the battle easily since the flag was gone, but the battle itself wasn't conclusive, and since then they haven't gone marching or ventured out. He wonders if he would succeed in the parry that he did last time if he tried doing it again, but he's not sure. Jackson tells him that he's not going to heal if he keeps moving, and Incred says he's not overdoing it, this much is enough. Ragna tells him that the most he can do right now is stretch and continue resting. Rem asks if he's trying to spread his laziness to him, telling him to stop loitering in the walkway. Ragna goes to find his sword, and Rem asks if he's trying to fight, but Incred says he has a question regarding the sword, saying that he used a technique that he never practiced before. He asks if it's normal. Rem says that it's nothing special, and using the heart of the beast, he can actually see what the enemy is doing, so he would have been able to see how they swing the sword and how they use their strength. Ragna tells him that it should be easier since he learned the basics and should succeed with concentrating on a single point, so he definitely would have seen more. But he still must have gotten pretty lucky. Incred accepts the answer, saying that the day that just passed was not just one day for him, rather, it was hundreds of days of struggle. He got stronger through sheer hard work, not just through memorizing patterns. No matter how pathetic his talent is, he can continue growing. He tells both Rem and Ragna that he wants to duel. Rem says that they call him a madman, but he's clearly more psycho, and Ragna says that it's rare for him to agree with this idiot, but asks what he hopes to achieve in that condition. Ragna says that with his body in that state, duels are off the table. The fairy commander then enters the tent, asking him if he was the one who broke the spell. He says that he thought Command would start asking questions soon, but he wonders why she is here herself. He tells her that it was him who did it, and he saw it while on patrol. He knew a little about it beforehand. She says there were 5 decoys, asking how he found the real one, and he tells her that he just guessed. She seems suspicious but heads out, and he asks if that's really all she came for. She says that she also came to see his face, and she truly believes that fate has brought the two of them together. As she leaves, he wonders what she is talking about with fate. Rem starts to laugh, asking if there's something going on between them, and Ragna says he realizes now that he was skilled with women. Ingrid tells him to shut up. Craze says that he knew he was suited to start a host bar with him, and he'll make the terms favorable for him. Ingrid just wonders why she's like that himself. Craze then tells him that he has some good news, as a squire from the Night Order is here. Ingrid is told that it is the Scarlet Cloak Night Order. The battalion he is with is called the Cyprus Division, which was named after a knight, and Cyprus is part of the Scarlet Cloak Night Order. Knights are especially skilled, which is true even across the entire continent. That's why a Night Order has many more people besides knights, squires, servants, and students of knights. Once a squire is approved by their knight, they become a proto-knight, and far above them exist knights who have surpassed humanity. Squires rarely fight in battles without their knight, so this squire is probably about to become a proto-knight. They then get yelled at, telling them it's time to go to battle. They say maybe they were all waiting for the squire, but it's time to head out, and they tell Ingrid to rest well. But Ingrid's eyes look determined, and Rem can sense that, saying that he can tell that he wants to come with them, but he guesses it can't be helped. Ingrid really wants to see the ideal that he has kept as a dream this entire time, on the battlefield. We see everybody forming up, and Ingrid says that he's about to witness a small piece of that dream. As he and the boys make it, his eyes are fixated on something as he sees a man slowly walking towards the enemy army all by himself. His cape flowing in the wind, he marches forward as the enemies draw their bows, beginning to grow uneasy as the air gets more tense with each step. As he gets closer and closer, the enemies yell fire, and the arrows begin to be unleashed one by one. The man looks up at them, and slowly the sky begins to get blotted out with a sea of arrows. They start to fall directly towards the man. He finally stops walking and kneels down to the ground while holding onto his blade. His legs begin to give off a strange aura, and Ragna says that he used determination on his legs, as we see the wind channeling upwards from him. He quickly bursts off the ground, completely redirecting all the arrows above him as he charges directly into the enemy line. Ingrid is completely speechless as the man stops just shy of the enemy front line. In one quick breath, he unsheathes his blade, slaughtering them and sending half of their corpses flying through the air with just that one strike, and Ingrid now realizes how big the gap truly is. The enemy soldiers start to wonder if they are dreaming. The man kneels down once more and quickly dashes forward, swinging to his left, sending a whole group of them flying, and then immediately dashing forward again and swinging to his right, carving out the enemy front lines. From the enemy's point of view, they are just getting sent flying through the air as one man renders their army useless, akin to a natural disaster. The commander yells, telling them to stop him, calling them all idiots, only for him to get ahead of himself as the man quickly leaps up, decapitating him on the spot. He then lands directly on top of the horse, and Ingrid's eyes are filled with nothing but admiration. Rem says that guy's not bad, and he isn't called the war specialist for no reason. Ragna starts to think about how it would be a good fight, but Jackson says the enemy had at least 5 opportunities to stop him, and the enemy commander is an idiot. Odan prays for those who died, and Craze says it's going to be over without them needing to do anything. Ingrid starts to think about what kind of sword technique he used, asking if maybe it's the righteous sword, but immediately correcting himself, saying it has elements of the heavy and the swift sword. He explains how the righteous sword is a just and intricate technique that lures the opponent into your moves. The heavy sword utilizes strength to cut through everything and dominate the opponent. The confounding sword tricks the opponent, ambushing them, and the swift sword overwhelms the enemy with speed. The flowing sword is a gentle technique that parries the enemy's attacks and retaliates. Ingrid says that even though the heavy and swift swords are at opposite ends of the spectrum, he can see both of them in this man. Then he realizes something, saying that they might actually be different in character. But all of these techniques started from one single source, and if one understands the commonality between all 5 and wields the sword like a living object, then maybe that is the secret to having any form of moderate success. He starts to have some form of enlightenment as his eyes start to close slowly. The main army starts to charge in towards the enemies, and both Rem and Ragna look at Incrid and realize. Rem smiles and says that the squad leader is about to overcome something, so they shouldn't let anybody disturb him, and they all start to form a wall around him. While Incrid is lost in his mind, he says nothing changes despite his understanding, as understanding is nothing. He starts to look up, while in this limbo-like state, he only sees the wall he must overcome, and he says that it exists to show him how much further he has to claw his way up. As the main forces run by him, in his mind, he is still juggling with trying to truly understand the thought that he is having. He is climbing over the wall, saying that he will make sure he sees it all the way to the top. The armies now begin to battle, and Incrid starts to see a light on top of the wall. The troops finally start to push the enemies back. As Incrid continues crawling up more and more, the allied troops raise their hands into the air, cheering for victory. Incrid opens his eyes, saying that the war is finally coming to an end, and the following winter and spring are going to be very busy. Back at another kingdom, it is none other than the Principality of Aspen, and we learn that it is controlled by three main families: Aspen the Sovereign, Hurrier the Mighty, and Atkins the Administrator. The Administrator says they use the Frog General as an excuse, and the frogs do require a nightly response, so they have nothing to retort. The king starts to get angry, saying that the Greyhounds will pay for this, and Greyhound tells him that this will not end well for the enemies. So back to the army slowly marching back. Incrid says that after the lengthy war, the Aspen forces headed back as well, so they had no choice but to do the same. They made their way to Border Guard, the kingdom's remote fortress city, and with its proximity to Aspen, the city is heavily militarized, with 1 in 5 people being a soldier. The city commander starts yelling, telling everybody that he highly praises the heroes of their empire, specifically the Nalilia heroes who have led them to victory in the war. He calls forth Incrid, saying that for destroying the spells of Aspen, he plans to reward him. Everybody watches him step up onto the stage, asking how some useless squad leader like that really broke the spell, saying that he's actually weak and must just be taking credit for what his squad did. As they keep talking to him, Mac then steps forward, telling them to shut up, as Andrew says that he isn't someone they should be talking down to. Everybody who has been a part of his journey so far smiles watching him receive his reward, saying that he is much more than they'll ever know. As Incrid accepts the reward, he looks down at it, wondering what to do with his money. Craze asks if he wants some recommendations, and Incrid says yes. He wants to go to a good store, specifically, he wants to go to the best blacksmith in the city. As they head there, the dude starts yapping at him, saying there's no way he's going to use all that money to buy a sword, saying that the regular sword isn't bad, and there are also so many swords lying around on the battlefield. Incrid says to become a knight, he needs to prove his strength as well as his skill. As he starts to unsheath his blade, he looks down at it, telling Craze that he is going to take the soldier promotion exam, as his time as a lowly foot soldier is now over. Craze says that he thought he wasn't interested in promotions, and Incrid says that he can't stay at the bottom forever. He guesses it's time to get things set up then. There is a soldier ranking system to increase morale. Those stronger than the existing scale are designated as special, and you're treated according to your rank. To be promoted to a rank, you have to duel 3 soldiers in the rank you're aiming for and win. For the soldiers there to witness it, it is a fun sport involving bets. As we see, Craze is hustling everybody. He asks who wants to bet on Incrid. His opponent walks up, asking why somebody at the lowest rank is going for medium straight away, saying an award shouldn't warrant stupidity, but it must have been his squad who earned it, so that is getting to his head. Incrid says that he must be the first one, and he's skilled even among the medium ranks, hailing from a famous mercenary group. Back to the hustler. Only one person has voted in favor of Incrid, asking which idiot did that. The hustler says that you can't know the results until you see it. Incrid says he only got stronger by dying over and over up until now, but there's no risk of death in this fight, so this is his one and only chance. He needs to look ahead, not let his guard down. While his skills may be pathetic, he will show that hard work is not a foreign concept to him, and most of the guys here he never would have stood a chance against before. But now won't be the case, as he forces himself to focus and fight like his life is on the line. His opponent screams, running in, saying here he comes, and Incrid says that he needs to try to pull off the parry he learned from the last battle, and he can use that to create an opening. He swings his blade, knocking the sword out of his opponent's hand immediately. As it starts to fly away, Incrid notices the guy's fingers are bent in weird directions. The guy starts screaming about how his shit is cooked, and while he's distracted, Incrid charges forward, hitting him in the face with the hilt of his sword. The guy falls to the floor, bleeding out of the mouth, and Incred wonders why the hell this guy is so weak. Everybody starts to go crazy, saying there's no way that loser just won, and they ask Craze if he was the one who bet on him, saying that surely he knew how strong he was. Of course, he didn't, as even he can't believe how strong he was, saying he just didn't want his bet to be empty. When someone else says he needs to have more faith in his squad leader, Incred says that maybe the guy let his guard down, but even if that's the case, he wonders if all duels end quickly, and he shouldn't be that weak if he has a medium rank. An older man steps up, telling him not to get cocky, saying it was sheer luck. He readies his spear, saying he'll fight him this time. Incred recognizes him, saying he's part of the heavy infantry, the strongest in his battalion. The man distracts him by moving the tip of his spear, trying to surprise him. Then immediately thrusts forward, but Incred's body moves before he can react, cutting the tip of the man's spear off, wondering why he thrust from so far away, saying maybe there's a trick up his sleeve, but immediately realizes that's just a bad thought as the dude looks like he just dropped a brick in his pants. Wondering if it's his turn to strike now, Incred takes the chance, kicking the dude in the stomach, making him fall to the floor. We see Henry and the crowd watching while everybody's surprised that he won again, realizing it's not a coincidence if he won twice in a row, and that the lowest rank took down 2 medium ranks. Craze start to ask who else wants to fight him, and everybody starts to wonder when so many people arrive, saying it's embarrassing to go out there and lose to him. Vengeance calls them idiots, saying everybody's scared now after looking down on him. His friend tries to say he was the most condescending, but he immediately tells him to shut up. Andrew starts to sit up, saying that after losing last time he trained with Mac every night and wants to ask for a rematch, but Mac tells him not to bother, as he makes him sit back down. He says he's gotten way stronger, and he doesn't think even he could win against him right now, and they both sit there watching intently. Rem nudges somebody, telling him to go up, and the guy wonders who he's talking to, only to get scared after seeing who it is. Rem says that he was just talking about how much he must have kissed the commander's ass to get his promotion, and that he should go up and show off his skills, but the guy says he's not scared. Incred says it was so normal for him to struggle up until now, so he didn't notice the stabbing pervert in the first loop he went through, the assassin in the next, and even Mitch from the most recent one, as well as the squad members he trained with daily. He just had it hella rough until now, and his old teacher told him to never underestimate his opponent. The yapper finally walks up asking if he is distracted before his fight, and Incred says no. He thought that advice was irrelevant to him, and he never thought he'd get to look down on another person in a fight. The yapper asks what the hell is with his face then, as we see Incred looking smug, saying that he's now become strong enough, and he tells him that it's just interesting, as he wants to know what it's like to dominate an enemy. He charges forward, and the yapper freezes up. Incred smacks his sword into his, and we learn that the Nalilia respects strength as they are called the Kingdom of Knights. Incred raises his blade and swings down again, cracking the yapper blade. The guy looks up in complete fear as Incred raises his blade once more, swinging down, stopping just shy of the dude's head. The dude's eyes start to roll to the back of his head, and he foams at the mouth. Incred says now he has proven himself, as everybody in the crowd is stun-locked, bro straight pissed in his pants. Somebody calls him the Spellbreaker, saying it really was him who destroyed the flag, and that he didn't just ride his squad's achievements. Andrew starts to stand up and screams, calling him the Spellbreaker. Incred wonders what he's doing. Andrew yells, telling everybody to say it too, saying if it wasn't for him, at least half of them would be dead. They all start to chant, calling him the Spellbreaker, as that is now his new nickname. He decides that it's not that bad, and the hustler runs over, telling him that he is now a medium rank. Incred says it's too early to get excited, as he has to get to a high rank. Bro is confused, asking if he's going to keep going, and a man stands up in the crowd, saying this is interesting. As he walks forward, people look over to see an eagle patch on his arm, meaning he is part of the border guard, the ones directly serving the crown, which is an elite squad. They wonder why he is here. The man calls out to Incred respectfully, asking if he would like to duel as well. Incred and the man begin to have a stare down. Rem stands up, saying that this is going to be difficult. Incred explains that the border guard is equivalent to Aspen's greyhounds, which means this guy might be as strong as Mitch. He wonders what would happen if he fought someone like him without dying. He points his blade at him, telling the man to come at him. The man finds this amusing, saying he's not scared while going against someone like him in the special forces, and after watching him, he's way more interesting than he thought. The crowds rush to cheer him on, telling Incred to show them the power of the Spellbreaker, and that the kings of the battlefield are the infantry, as that chant starts to drown out everything else. The man asks if they're stupid, saying that they know he's part of the infantry too, and that they are too cocky with their recent victory. He's going to try to humble them as he readies himself and then immediately dashes forward to close the gap with Incrid. Incrid starts to lock in, following the tip of his blade, seeing exactly where the path is going. He leans back slightly, just enough to parry the blade, and the man is surprised, saying that he's wasting as little movement as possible and that surprised him. He then grabs Incrid by the collar and tries to throw him down, but Incrid grabs onto his arm and raises his blade directly above the man. A chill runs down the man's spine as he realizes that if he doesn't dodge, he will die. As Incrid starts to thrust forward, he stabs the ground as the man sidesteps it. The man returns the favor by rearing his fist back and stabbing forward with all of his might directly towards Incrid's chest. Incrid doesn't even try to avoid it and instead grabs the blade directly with his bare hands and then knees the dude straight in the stomach. The guy regains his footing, as the momentum is back to being equal. He starts to charge back in, as does Incrid as he grabs a throwing knife off his vest. They both start stabbing directly at each other's heads, only for the fairy commander to appear, knocking both of their blades away with one strike. She tells them that's enough, any more and they'll kill each other. Incrid is gassed out, and so is the other dude, and Jackson is ready to kill him. Actually, it's not just him but rather all of the boys have pulled up. Rem says, "Look at this lucky bastard." The man tells him not to get too excited as this is only a duel. He says he almost got him when he lost sight of his movements and wonders what would have happened if they went until the end. The man says he didn't expect anything but he can't deny recognizing him, introducing himself as Torres, a platoon commander of the border guards. Incrid introduces himself as they shake hands. The crowd is surprised that he is a platoon commander, meaning he just fought a special rank soldier. That means he is at least a high rank one now, and they start to give him their respect. Incrid glances back at their cheers and raises his hand, brushing it off. Torres says he likes his reaction and that he'll see him again soon, calling him a high rank soldier. Incrid says with this he is one step closer. On the outskirts of the town inside of the barracks, a man tries to tell Incrid to come to his company as he is the first company commander of the heavy armored infantry called the Turtles, and his name is Graham. Incrid says this is his third request, and maybe it's because of his rank or the role he played in breaking the spell. Accepting an offer means he would be a monthly lease in the military. While it's a great offer, he doesn't want it, so he bows apologizing to Graham. Graham says that if it's about the 4th company commander, he'll have a word with him. Incrid says that's not it. The guy says he seems completely unbothered and just knows that he would still like him on his side. Incrid asks if he would like Rem, and the guy says he does not want a psycho in his squad and that he survived the last battle thanks to him and should keep at it. Craze asks if it's time to pack their bags, and Incrid says no. He asks why he's rejecting everything, saying right now he'll get treated well no matter where he goes. When Incrid goes to explain it, somebody else appears. When they turn to see who it is, it's Torres, who asks Incrid how he's been. He says he'll be direct with him and wants him to come to the border guards. Incrid says that the border guards are directly under the Crown's command, and it's a better offer than the one from the Turtles. Rem says that this is something Incrid could have only dreamed of before, and even if he rejects the other offers, he'd be stupid to reject this one. Torres says he realized that as soon as they exchanged blows, that he wants a harder fight, and if he comes to him, he'll bestow him with hellish training and insane challenges. This means he'll be able to realize his full potential. Rem thinks the deal is over, and so does Ragna and the rest as they're already coming to terms with it. Incrid waits for a second and then says if he's talking about endless hellish training, there's no place like where he is currently and that what he wants is not to reach his full potential but rather fully overcome it. Sometime later, Rem is shivering in bed, saying it's so cold and he wishes he could fight it with his axe. He asks Incrid where he's going, telling him to get him some hot stones. Incrid says that with the battle over, he's completely useless. Odan says it'll get warmer if he moves and he should come outside for some training. Rem barks at him, saying he's gonna kill him. Odan asks Incrid if he wants to train with him, saying it'll thaw his frozen muscles. Incrid says he needs to go on duty right now and he'll do it once he's back. Then Rem reminds him to buy hot stones. As Incrid leaves, he says winter hit real quick. It jumps to a market stall and he says the border guard's purpose is to go to battle, but with the lack of battle, they patrol the streets to safeguard the city. He's introduced to 2 people named Jack and Bo, and the 3 of them are meant to work as a team today. Incrid wonders if they are part of the scouting mission, saying he has heard those names somewhere before. Jack says being on duty with the famous Spellbreaker is an honor, and Bo says he heard he got promoted to a high rank as well. Going from the lowest rank to the high rank in one go is amazing. Incrid says he got lucky, and Jack says he wants to see how strong he is, asking if they can duel when they go back. Incrid says he's always welcome to duels, and Jack says that's a promise. Later on, while they are patrolling, Jack and Bo start to get closer to him, wondering why they have to do this in such cold weather. Incrid wonders why they are so close, saying he's not big enough to block the wind. As they pass by a market stall, a robed figure begins to approach them. Incrid notices something as the person begins to trip. He goes to help the kid, but they immediately pull out a dagger, and before he can even react, it's plunged directly into his chest. He begins to spit up blood, wondering what's going on, and Jack and Bo quickly cover it up by saying that he was drinking so early in the morning and they are hiding him from the crowd, meaning they are all working together. The robed man asks if he's surprised, saying that a greyhound never forgets its target. Incrid says that this half-fairy assassin must have been sent because he broke the spell. The assassin pulls the knife out of Incrid's chest, causing him to drop to his knees as Jack and Bo leave him. Jack says the mission is successful and they should head back. One of them is named Rotten, as we see him up in a guard tower nodding for confirmation. Incrid says he remembers them now. They were the wounded soldiers from the recon mission according to Craze, and they found an excuse to make contact with Aspen. As he falls to the ground, he says it's a 4v1 and this is going to be rough. A woman spots him on the street and her face turns pale as she screams as his blood begins to pool out. Incrid says this will be interesting. His eyes open wide awake, and he tells them good morning. Rem asks what's wrong with him, and Incrid says nothing, he just wants to start today with some energy. Rem again tells him to get some hot stones. As Incrid approaches Odon, who is pouring water on his head in the ice, it immediately steams off. Odon asks what he can do for his squad leader. Incrid says he mentioned a method about heating up his body. Odon says it's called bare body training, and it's essential to keep your strength in this cold weather as it will prepare you for any situation. Incrid tells him to teach him. He saw the dagger being pulled out, but he could not react because his body wasn't prepared, he was frozen solid. Odon instructs him to get into a stretching position and says he should have noticed that as soon as he saw Jack and Bo stick close to him and he'll take those two down first. After he can't take them down too early, the assassin will flee. Odon says his muscles will be sad if he can't even hold this. Incrid tells him they're already screaming. He gets introduced to Jack and Bo once more and tells them it's nice to meet them. They ask him if he's cold seeing him without his cloak, and he says he was just training. They start to get close to him again, and Incrid shows that his body isn't in its prime, thanks to Odon. Right about now should be when the assassin makes his appearance as he spots him in the crowd, and on cue he makes his appearance from a bit ahead. Incrid immediately raises his hands, swinging backwards, hitting Jack in the face, but Bo manages to dodge under it. Bo asks if he somehow noticed and draws for his blade. Incrid sees the assassin, saying he's either going to charge in and attack or run away. He draws his blades and needs to take care of these two quickly. The assassin throws something at him, which makes a screeching sound. Incrid wonders what the sound is, but it's too late as the throwing knife has already pierced his chest. He looks down in confusion as it was so fast he didn't even see it. Not only that, but because of how far they were in through the crowd, it means this dude is deadly accurate. The guy tells him once more that a greyhound never forgets its target. Incrid says it pierced his heart by the time he noticed it flying through the air, and that is a dagger faster than sound. The same woman from before screams that a person just died here. Incrid says he needs to face melee and ranged assailants at once. He begins to smile, then faces death, asking how he should prepare. Incrid says that the half-fairy stabs when he's close and throws a dagger when he's far. This isn't hard to understand as this wall is relatively simple. He continues his stretching. Incrid says death. Odon asks if he's threatening him as he sits atop his back, but Incrid says no, he genuinely thinks he's going to die. Ragna asks if he's doing torture training or something, and Rem laughs, asking if it's that hard. Incrid tells him to get over here, saying he'll show him how to do it. Jackson enters, saying it's his turn on duty. He sees them all stretching and struggling except Odon, who laughs, saying this is his territory so they should step out of it. Jackson looks confused, and Incrid asks what's wrong with his face, saying they're only training. Incrid starts drawing in the dirt, saying he needs to somehow block the dagger he'll throw. He says the accuracy and speed aren't like other daggers, and it's shaped oddly too. Jackson then asks him if that's a whistle dagger. Incrid asks if that's what this is called, and Jackson says it's because of the sound it makes when it's thrown. If handled well, the target will never know what hit them, and it's good to stay far away from things using it. Incrid says he'll remember that, no matter how good he is at throwing daggers, He can't do anything if it's blocked ahead of time. Incred raises his hands once more, swinging at Jack and Bo. Jack again gets hit, but Bo does not. Bo asks if he noticed, and Incred grabs him by the robe and uses him as a meat shield, saying that he should take down these idiots and use them to protect himself from the dagger. The whistle sound comes through, but it's too late as Incred is stabbed in the stomach and Bo is stabbed in the back. Even Jack is stabbed in the throat, and Incred realizes that he threw 3 in such a short time, and this dude is incredibly skilled. The assassin starts to grin and laughs as everybody begins to run away, screaming murder. Incred says he'll kill his own people if they get in the way, or maybe he never thought of them as his people. The assassin kneels close to him, saying that was admirable. Incred glares at him as the man repeats the line, "A greyhound never forgets its target." Incred says thankfully, and the guy wonders why he's joking at his deathbed. He pulls out his whistled dagger, calling him a funny guy. Incred admits that he underestimated this whole thing. As the dagger gets pulled out of him and his wound begins to gush out, he says that a wall is still a wall. The boatman asks why he is enjoying this, saying he should laugh while he still can because the despair at the end of that enjoyment is why this is a curse. Incred wakes back up in bed and heads out, saying no to him, this is solely a blessing. He asks Jackson to tell him about a whistled dagger, and Jackson asks where it came from. Incred asks if that's important for the explanation, and Jackson says that it's multiple thin blades pressed into one, which causes the whistling sound as it flies. At one point, it was called the dagger that is only heard, and it's really hard to follow with a human eye. Incred asks what he's meant to do if he wants to see and dodge it, and Jackson says that he can't. Incred asks what if he has 2, and Jackson asks if he needs 2, and he says yes, that he does. Jackson says that this guy is being weird again, wondering where he even heard about this. He says there's no point in spotting an already thrown dagger, he has to watch the hand of the thrower. The path it takes is decided at the moment it's thrown. There are ways to hide himself as it's thrown, but it's not hard to spot once you know what it is. Incred asks if he thinks he can learn the technique, and Jackson says not with the way he throws. Incred says he's continuously catching strays, and Jackson asks if he wants him to teach him how to throw daggers. Incred is surprised that he offered to teach him first, and Jackson says that if he's not confident, he doesn't need to do it, but Incred tells him he'll learn. Back at the market, Jack and Bo are following him once more. Incred explains that the moment he throws his dagger, he needs to relax his whole body and focus as the blade leaves his hands. Seeing and dodging it is the same. As he stares at where the assassin usually appears, he sees only his feet before drawing his blade, immediately cutting Jack's head off. As Bo goes to reach for his, he turns towards him, slicing him through the stomach. The woman that usually sees him die screams, saying that there's been a murder, and both Jack and Bo have dropped to the floor. The assassin starts to approach, and Incred says he needs to watch his opponent and switch from relaxed to focused. He can only avoid dying if he protects his heart, and he needs to watch the tip of his hand. The dagger is immediately lodged into his arm, and he didn't even see it. He looks down at it only to catch another one straight to the chest, saying that shit was too fast as it only lasted for a split second, but he saw something for sure at the start. He saw a shine from the assassin's hand, and he's sure of it. The assassin goes to say his line, but Incred finishes for him, saying that a greyhound never forgets its target. The assassin's surprised and asks how he knew. Incred smiles, saying that he'll see him again because after a few more loops, he'll know all of his tricks. In the next loop, Incred quickly draws his blade, piercing Jack in the throat, immediately following it up by killing Bo as well, saying he needs to eliminate these 2 as fast as possible. Everybody starts to scream about a murder, and he quickly turns his body to the side, looking for the assassin, saying he's no longer someone who only dreams of doing better. He sees the shine in the assassin's hand and says that he can achieve what he wants through hard work. The dagger is immediately thrown as it soars through the air towards him. Incred uses concentrate on a single point to follow its path and uses metal bracers to block the first one. The assassin begins to spin another one, calling him crazy while sweating nervously. Incred realizes that it's coming from the front and needs to dodge to the side. But it was none other than a feint, as the assassin is still spinning the whistle dagger on his finger. Incred realizes this and accepts his fate, as there's nothing he can do when the assassin throws the blade for real this time, piercing him through the chest. He drops to his knees, saying that he can adjust his timing according to his movements, and that this dagger is pretty damn cool as he pulls it out of his chest. He looks down at it, saying that he wants to have this as well. We see him spinning a throwing knife on his finger, and he throws it towards a fruit. He misses, and Jackson asks what he's doing. Incred says he's practicing with the whistle dagger, and Jackson tells him that's not a whistle dagger. Incrid tells him that he'll have a real one soon. As he is spinning his throwing knife, the string breaks, and it flies right by Jackson's head, leading to an awkward silence. Incrid explains that this is the 8th loop. The whistle dagger comes straight in, and Incrid ducks underneath, saying he won't fall for his delayed attacks again. He then feels a sharp pain in his back as we see an arrow lodged into it, and he forgot that Rotten was up in the tower. On the 9th loop, he's throwing his own dagger, which hits Rotten straight in the throat. The assassin calls him an idiot for looking away and throws his dagger, only for him to die once more. Then we see the fruit he was throwing at earlier get pierced as Jackson was holding it, and it falls to the floor. He looks over at Incrid, surprised, and Incrid says that his arm and hands are for guiding it, and your entire body is used to throw, asking what he is missing here. Jackson says that this should be enough, asking if he learned to throw daggers before. Of course, Jackson taught him, but Incrid can't tell him that, so he says that he saw someone throwing one on the battlefield, and he just copied him. Jackson wonders if he is a hidden genius or something and asks if he has heard of the throwing blade technique, saying it was created by a man called Georg, an assassin. The name comes from his weapon, the whistle dagger. Georg strived for a soundless blade made of a very thin single-bladed knife. However, that was too difficult to handle, which led to the whistle dagger as they know it today. Incrid says that must have some real history behind it, and Jackson asks if he hasn't heard about it, saying that he thought he would have. Incrid asks why he would think that, and Jackson says that it's because his stance fits perfectly with throwing the whistle dagger. Now on his 10th loop, we see Jack asking him where he wants to go, and Incrid says that he told him they are patrolling another route today. Jack tries to tell him they were assigned to the market, though, and that they'll be punished for this. Incrid barks at him, pulling rank, saying that he ranks the highest, so he'll take responsibility to follow him. Jack and Bo then discuss what to do, and as they get further from the town, we see them up at a hilltop. Incrid says the market is a stage that has been perfectly set up by the assassins, but he doesn't plan to play their games. Jack tells him that they should return, and Incrid asks them what they earned for betraying them. Jack and Bo realize the jig is up and immediately draw their weapons, running at him. He slices horizontally, cutting Jack open, and immediately impales Bo with his sword, killing them both. Then he glares over as the assassin makes his way up the hill, but Rotten is there as well. Rotten is surprised, and Incrid tells them that they're late and to start already. The assassin then throws out 3 whistle daggers at the exact same time. Incrid pushes his hand on the ground and lifts his body up over them, saying it doesn't matter how many he throws as long as he sees his hands. Rotten then goes for a crossbow shot on his back, but Incrid throws a knife directly at him, piercing his skull. The assassin calls him an idiot, saying he looked away. Incrid then blocks it with his bracer, and the assassin starts to have some cold sweats as Incrid slowly turns towards him and lowers his arm, giving this dude one hell of a glare. The assassin starts to shake, asking him who the hell he is, and Incrid tells him there's no need for him to know as he pulls the dagger out of his forearm. He asks him how many of the whistle daggers he has on him. The assassin realizes that Incrid understands how to throw the whistle daggers as well, wondering if he is an assassin. Then he tells him that he has 2 left. Incrid says he's jealous as he only has 1. The assassin tells him that he sure does have some balls to be joking around like this and that he must be crazy. He should know that he's a dead man as soon as he throws that one out. Incrid says that there's only one way to know and they'll have to figure that out once he actually does it. He may hide his hands but he can't hide his entire arm. Incrid starts to focus in, saying that if he pays attention to his posture, then that'll be the key to dodging these daggers. On cue, the assassin's arm starts to be visible. As his hand is twirling one, Incrid realizes there's 2 at once. The assassin throws them as Incrid easily avoids them. He retaliates with his own, which the assassin dodges, getting his cape caught. Incrid stays locked in on the assassin, saying that he bets that he actually has more. As he sees them in the dude's hands, he realizes he's right. Incrid then raises his as well. The assassin is shocked, since he thought he only had 1. Incrid avoids the dude's whistle daggers and throws his own, which the assassin narrowly avoids too. He tells him that he lied, drawing his blade, calling him a bastard. Incrid says that he did the same, and this is something he hasn't seen so far. He guesses there's no rule saying that assassins can only use long-range attacks. The assassin starts charging in with a lowered position. Incrid says that this is a new attack. As the assassin thrusts forward, Incrid says it doesn't matter, as we see him grabbing onto the dude's wrist after dodging the attack. The assassin now understands that he's in some hot shit, as Incrid starts to pull him towards him. He raises his sword, saying that this is the end, and swings down, cutting half of the assassin's skull open and his chest. He then pants. As he pulls his sword out, the assassin's body falls over, and Incred says it took him 10 attempts to overcome this wall. He sighs and looks up, saying that this cycle of fighting, losing, and getting stronger, then eventually winning is so damn exhilarating. Bro is getting addicted. He then looks back down at the assassin's corpse, and wonders if he has any more whistle daggers. He starts searching the dude's clothes, finding a good bit on his chest, and decides to take them with him. Back at the commander's lodging, we hear the ferry commander asking if he almost got assassinated, but that he expected that and led them away. He tells her that it was actually just a coincidence, as we see the whistle daggers on his chest now. She says that she doesn't really buy it, asking if it's a coincidence that he fought 4 people and only got a minor scratch. He says the goddess of luck is on his side, but she looks at him with eyes full of suspicion, as he tries his best not to even make eye contact. She then tells him to return to his post, as he heads back to the boys. He opens the door, saying he's back. As an axe flies straight by his face, he sidesteps it, and Rem is surprised he managed to dodge a sneak attack. Incred asks if he's insane, saying he almost killed him. Rem says he's got assassins on him now, and he's got to keep training. Incred tells him to eat this, as he throws a hot stone towards him. Rem catches it with his bare hands, for some reason he knows it's a hot stone, but not that it's edible, and starts screaming. The axe actually cuts some of Incred's hair. So he asks Craze how much for a haircut, and then they start haggling, as Rem is freaking out about the damn stone. They settle on 8 copper, as we see them now outside, with Craze cutting his hair. Incred then asks if he can get a discount for being a squad mate. Craze tells him to go to one in the city if he doesn't like it, but Incred says he won't do that, as the ones in the city suck. It then begins to snow. Craze looks up at the sky, saying it's pretty cold today. Rem calls it the devil's powdered shit, whereas Odan says it's a test from God. Ragna says he agrees, and Jackson just sits there silently. Incred just wonders why they are all out here, but it's obviously to protect him. He wonders how the assassin got into the border guard. Also thinking about Jack, Bo, and Rotten, wondering if they were corrupt before or after they joined, saying that someone else might be working with them. He asks Craze if he knew the 3 who died and where they are from. Craze says that Jack was conscripted after he was caught pickpocketing. Bo insulted a noble, which gets Rem's approval, and low-key Incred's too. Craze continues, saying that Rotten was a mercenary for a failed merchant association, and they all joined in the past year. He also thinks they were in a guild together. Incred says that based on all of these things, there's only one thing he can think of, and that has to be the Thieves' Guild. What in the Skyrim? He says it is a guild in name only, a den of criminals. A Thieves' Guild member would know the ins and outs of the city, so it makes sense. He asks Jackson if he knows anything about the Thieves' Guild. Jackson asks why he's asking him. Incred says that he thought he might know, asking if he doesn't. Jackson says he's become too open, but tells him anyway, saying after they reconstructed, his contact in the guild went silent, and he doesn't know any more than that. Craze tells him that he's all done, as Rem says that his barber lined that shit up really well. We see his hair's a little shorter. Incred looks up at the snow, saying there's quite a bit of it. Jackson then tells them all that he's going to be out in the city tonight, and Rem says that he knows he's just trying to get out of snow shoveling duty. Incred thinks about it, asking why they don't all go on a mission instead, and if they agree, none of them are going to have to shovel. As soon as they hear that, they immediately agree, saying bet. Even Craze is ready to go. Bro can't believe that everybody here hates snow shoveling this much. He says he's going to have to go get permission from the commander, and Ragna calls him lazy for not having done that already. They all head inside, as even Odan tells him to go do it now. Incred says at least they are unified in their hate for snow shoveling. He heads back to the ferry commander after telling her everything, and she asks if he wants to go investigate the Thieves' Guild. He says with her permission, of course. While she's still suspicious of him, he continues not making eye contact, and she realizes it's deeper, asking if he only wants to skip snow duty. Before she can even finish her sentence, he says no, and he really just wants to seek justice. He can't believe she sniffed his bullshit out so fast. He heads back out and regroups with the boys, who ask where the Thieves' Guild thing came from anyway. Craze says that he's talking about the Gilfin Guild, asking if he has any info. Incred says he doesn't, and that's what they're here to get. Poor Rem is cold. He then tells Jackson that they are going to wait in the inn and find out where they are. Jackson asks how he's meant to do that, and Incred says that's something he needs to figure out. Craze wonders what the hell kind of order that is, but Jackson immediately says he's got it. Craze starts to wonder if maybe he's the weird one here. At the inn, which is called Vanessa's Pumpkin Soup, Craze asks what will happen if the Gilfin Guild is innocent. Jackson says that even if they aren't involved with the assassins, they are still criminals. It's about time someone cleaned them out. Craze thinks about it and then tells the waitress named Lisa to wait. She asks what he needs, and he starts whispering into her ear. Ingrid wonders what it's about, but notices that Jackson is late. Even though it's him, he's still starting with no clues. He wonders if maybe his orders were too vague, because he's starting to feel bad for him. As we see Jackson standing on top of a roof covered with snow, overwatching something. He doesn't even move, just continuously letting the snow build up on him. As something catches his eyes, he sees two men walking down the street. Back at the inn, they start asking Craze if he knows who Lisa is. He tells them that her father is a shoemaker and her dream is to open an inn in the capital. They say he sure knows a lot about her, and he says that all pretty women are future customers. Jackson finally makes it back, opening the door covered in snow, saying he's found where they are located. They all stare at him, wondering where the hell the snow came from, and he stares, waiting for a reply. Ingrid then pulls the drumstick out of his mouth and tells Jackson to eat too. Jackson says he's good, asking why they are waiting, saying they should head out. Rem says hell no, it's way too cold out there. Jackson says he'll shower him with his own blood, and that'll make him warm. Ingrid says he also wants to head out now, but their mobility is compromised due to the snow and they need to be careful, so they'll leave when it stops snowing. He looks out the window and realizes it won't be anytime soon, then he tells them all to get ready to go. They say that he literally just said a couple seconds ago they were going to wait. He says that he's waited long enough. As we see them actually heading outside, poor Rem is still cold as hell. He says the inn was so nice, asking why they had to leave. As they make their way down the alley, a beggar beside them pulls out a hidden blade while glaring at them. It's not just him, but his boys pull up too as they start running at them. Rem takes off his blanket and greets the man with a smile, asking the man a hard-hitting question. He then hits the other dude in the face, saying that he came out of nowhere, asking Jackson if this is his friend. Craze says that they are probably with the Gilfin Guild. Jackson says that this will lead them to their hideout as he reveals a hatch. He says the beggars are their gatekeepers. The door is locked though, so they need to find a way in. Odon tells him that he just needs to get away from the door. He rears his fist back, saying knock, knock, as he punches straight down, shattering it open. He says it looks like they forgot to lock the door and that they can go ahead and enter. Rem calls him a brute, which is pretty funny from the barbarian. Ingrid says he doesn't really care as long as they get the door open. As they head inside, Rem wonders what he's going to ask them first, and Ingrid says that he'll talk later. For now, they just need to subdue them with force. As they make their way down a narrow hallway, the people on the other side have actually already been informed by someone about them, as we see them lying in wait for Ingrid and his squad. The leader of the small group says that reporting their failure would be a pain in the ass, and he guesses they can take care of it themselves. Another dude says he doesn't know if this is going to be okay as his squad mates are coming to him. The leader asks why they should care about a bunch of nobodies. As soon as he says that, the door gets blown off its hinges by Odon, who kicks it down again, saying it looks like they forgot to lock this one too. The leader now realizes that he might have bitten off a little bit more than he can chew. Rem says that now they can kill them, but Ingrid says to start with those who have never killed the weak. Those who are willing to go into a cell, those who do not want to die can throw down their weapons and cross this line, as he draws it in the dirt. He says that those who don't comply will die. Rem asks why they're not just killing them, and Ingrid says he's changed his mind, but just thinks to himself that he was pretty cool just now. Rem is just confused. The leader says that he's just another grunt, asking if he really thinks he can order them around. Odon says their judgment is clouded by demons, and they will not listen until he forces them to. Ingrid readies his blade, saying that they can do that as well, asking who the strongest is among them. The leader smirks, saying this will be fun, and tells their strongest swordsman, Wyvern, to step up. Mullet starts to walk up, following his leader's orders. He starts to wonder if Ingrid's even going to be able to block his blade, as he's never been beaten in his life. But before he finishes his own sentence, he charges forward with a surprise attack. Ingrid easily deflects Mullet's attack and stabs him straight through his chest. He says that is the Valen mercenary sword technique, stab while talking. And he's pretty used to it. The leader starts to sweat nervously, and Ingrid says if that was their strongest, he wanted to see the rest. As Mullet starts screaming on the ground, Ingrid says this is their last chance, telling them to surrender or die. Everybody else in the squad just kind of stares at him, wondering if he is really trying to act cool in this situation. They hesitate for a second, But then some of them begin dropping their weapons, saying they surrender. The leader gets pissed, and calls him a coward while swinging his blade directly towards him. The guy turns, looking at it, but before the leader's blade hits him, a whistle dagger gets lodged into his forehead as Incrid threw it to save the guy. The leader falls down to his knees, dead on the floor, while the rest look down at his body. Rem says, "Damn it, that was actually pretty cool," and it looks like Odan and Craze both share the same sentiment. Jackson too. Ragna's annoyed he didn't get the chance to show off, and Incrid, again, is saying they definitely thought that shit was sick. The rest of the group immediately start getting on their hands and knees, saying they surrender, begging not to die. Rem asks what the plan is, saying it'll be better to kill them now than deal with them again later. They plead, saying that there are people with sick mothers here. Incrid tells them that does not excuse their crimes. Baldy says that if he must kill someone, to kill him, as he is Gilfin. He asks if he means that he's the Gilfin Guild's Gilfin. Asking if he was not the boss of them all while pointing at the dead guy on the floor, Baldy says no, that was him. And Incrid says, wouldn't that make him Gilfin? But Baldy says that's him, actually. Incrid, confused as hell. Reminds me of Rush Hour. Craze says they named the guilds after random people on purpose. If they start getting chased down by the law, they ditch that person and run. Gilfin says that Bastard was a terrible person, but the rest of them aren't. So if he must kill someone, to kill him instead. They all start crying, saying they aren't gonna let Gilfin take the blame for this. As we learn, he's a pretty chill dude. He's taking care of all of their family members, and he's just a kind dude overall. Rem gets on their side, asking Incrid if he's really gonna kill them when they're acting like this, saying that he didn't think he'd be such a cold-hearted devil. Incrid says he was the one who suggested killing them. As Gilfin continues, saying that he'll give him the guild's fortune and everything else if he just lets them live. Incrid looks back down at him, while Craze smiles. Gilfin continues explaining, saying that most of it is in a safe, but they need to find the key that Bastard had hidden. Luckily for them, they have an expert at opening doors, as Odan rips the vault door open, revealing all the gold. Gilfin says my fault, OG Incrid tells the rest to go ahead, as they all start grabbing different things. Jackson grabs a knife. Rem grabs leather, saying this is super warm, and Ragna asks why he's not grabbing money. Incrid also starts looking through it, and spots something that interests him as he finds leather armor that's flexible yet strong, saying that he's gonna take this. Craze calls out to him, saying they should take over this guild. Incrid asks if he's wanting him to be a thief. Craze says yes, but not one that kills. Even if they took down this guild, within a month, another one will appear in its place. At this point, it would be better to just use Gilfin as a puppet to run this guild. Incrid thinks about it, saying this is all way too convenient, wondering if it was back when Craze was talking to Lisa. He says that he definitely told her something, and they were all gathered here for some reason. Craze laughs, asking if he noticed, saying that it was a plan to get them all together, and if he allows it, he'll get him a monthly payout from this guild, but also gathering information from it. Incrid says he doesn't particularly want a lot of money, but it's not like more money can hurt, so he'll allow it. Craze then tells Gilfin that from now on, they are a guild of thieves who don't kill, and they'll sort out the bad apples and send them to prison while they slowly work to reform the organization. Gilfin tells him that if they don't disband, they're all going to die. Craze asks why, as Gilfin continues explaining, saying that the dead boss worked for Aspen and their money. A frog comes every spring and fall to check on the guild. If they realize what happened, that frog is going to kill all of them. Craze tells him that won't be a problem, as they even have worse monsters on there. As he points to the boys, Incrid tells them that if they've got what they wanted, they should head back. Rem looks up at him, asking if he really thinks they're done shoveling the snow by now. Incrid can't believe he let such a crucial thought pass by. As he looks out the window, seeing it full of snow, Ragna says there's still some unfinished business here, whatever it may be. Odan starts sitting by the fire, saying that he's going to pray and reflect, and preach the word of God a little more. Jackson also says he has something to do, and he's going to head out until tomorrow morning. Incrid says that he didn't know that everybody was so busy, and he decides to join by laying down on the ground, as they prepare to take a group nap session. The next day rolls around, and Incrid starts reporting it all to the ferry commander, saying that they have located and destroyed the Thieves Guild. She asks if he had fun skipping snow duty. He says he has no clue what she's talking about, but can't believe she's so damn smart. She then says that she heard he doesn't turn down a duel. He says that is usually the case. She asks him to spar while pointing her blade at him. He says of course, and he wonders why he's getting a duel instead of punishment, saying he thought she was angry. She then comes in with a sweep to his leg, which he can't even react to as he falls over on the floor. She tells him to get back up, as he reaches for his blade. She comes in with yet another sweep, flipping him over this time. He wonders what's going on, and her first sword has always been this thin, saying it's like a whip. She tells him to get up over and over, as she continuously just makes him fall over. We see him laying there after a bit, gassed out. As she's looking down at him, she says that she's seen him respond instantly like he knew the future, but the way she sees it now, he seems blind. She really doesn't know who he is as a person, but it's still true that he broke the spell and killed 4 assassins. She looks up, saying that it's snowing again, and she'll be watching him. He says he can't believe she was actually angry about the snow, and he calls himself pathetic. He's trained endlessly with the sword, but he's never done anything with his bare hands. He's now realized what he's lacking. It's something that requires the use of your body, and every aspect of it. It's none other than martial arts, which he can learn from Odan, who it then jumps to, as he is squatting a whole tree. He tells Incred that one of the basics of martial arts, as he throws it down on the ground, is none other than a trained body. And it's not like he is wrong. Incred thinks about it, as some dude screams in the back, asking who the hell pulled this tree out. Odan tells him that he has a method for training. As Incred asks about the tree, Odan ignores him, saying that this method will push his body to the extreme, and it's called the isolation method. He smiles, saying that it's going to be really painful, so it would be better to go ahead and think of himself as a dead man. Obviously, death is something he is familiar with, so he tells him that's his specialty. It then jumps to him training with a boulder strapped to his back, doing lunges. He says that he is actually going to die. Odan says the fundamental principle of the isolation technique is overload. His muscles will become stronger as they are torn to shreds. As we see him shaking, Odan says that he needs to stay like this for 10 seconds, and he knows his limits better than he does. Incred wonders how he would even know that, as Odan pushes down on the rock. He smiles, saying that surely he regrets not starting this sooner, and that he needs to grow his body a lot more before he could properly start martial arts training. But Incred cuts him off, saying he doesn't have time to regret. The past is the past, and he is still faithful to the present. If he wasn't, he would have never made it past the first loop. He looks up at Odan, telling him to teach him something else while he is holding this pose. Odan can't believe he is so diligent, and his work ethic is nuts. He smiles, saying that he respects his squad leader, and saying that they can move on to the next thing. As we see even more rocks, he tells Incred he is going to return to the post on all fours today. The leopard watches this homicide in broad daylight. As Odan has him holding up the stones while having his arms extended out, Incred is clearly having a hard time and still doesn't give up, and the leopard continues watching. That night, Incred faceplants into the doorway of their barracks, and Rem asks him if somebody is bullying him, asking why he keeps coming back so worn out. He says that he is just training, as his leopard starts comforting him. Rem asks if he is going to keep it, and if so, that he should name it. He thinks about it, then says that it is warm, so he is going to call it Heater. The leopard starts hissing at him, and then he says that maybe because its eyes are blue, he will call it Blackie Blue. Of course, it hates this name too. Rem says that those names are all basically animal abuse, but Incred says that Blackie Blue sounds cute, but that he will have to think about the name a little more. It starts to cuddle up next to him as he starts to fall asleep. He begins to dream about a field of flowers, and when he opens his eyes, he is startled as he is standing up, walking around. There is an aurora borealis up in the sky above. He says it is weird to have a dream without seeing the boatsman, and that this doesn't really fit his vibe to begin with. As the petals are flowing through the wind, he turns, spotting a woman in a cloak approaching him. As she gets closer, we see her eyes are blue just like the leopard's, and he is surprised by how pretty she is. She then tells him Esther, and that her name is Esther. He looks down, seeing that Esther is now laying in his bed. She starts to sweat nervously. But luckily it's in the dead of night. We see he has his hand wrapped around her. She starts to blush, and he tells Esther goodnight while hugging onto her and falls back asleep. The next day, he starts to head out, and Rem asks where he is going, and he tells him training. Rem says that is gross, asking if he is not hurting from yesterday. He says that his body actually feels light, and Esther says of course it would if she used magic on him, and she needs him to free her from her curse so she can't have him die while throwing his body around like that. Rem asks if he met the priest last night or something, and he says nah, he dreamt about some woman though. Rem says that he didn't take him to be a guy who had dreams like that, asking what kind of woman it was. He recalls Esther's face, saying that she was hella pretty. She sighs, saying at least his eyes work well, and it is natural for magicians to endlessly explore magic and mystique, and in her quest for knowledge, she got cursed. Transforming into a beast, least one of you freaks gonna look at your cat sideways, but due to this her powers are also bound. She was wandering the fields one day, led by the scent of a curse, only to find none other than Incrid. She continues watching the training, and Odan says that he can't believe it, as it is normally a week for Doms to go away, and that he's already stronger than he was yesterday. Incrid finishes his set and stacks the rocks on top of each other, calling out to Blackie Blue. Esther hisses at him. He says my fault, asking her since when she started watching. Esther explains that the world of magic is affected by the power of names. If she gets carelessly called by another name, her powers will be further weakened. She used what little power she had left to tell him her name, and she made a mistake while doing so. As we see, that's why she transformed back into herself at night, which made her really embarrassed, but she's glad he's a dull man. She says he definitely is under some type of curse, but it hasn't fully set in yet. From what she can tell though, it is far more powerful than what she is dealing with. A powerful curse slowly eats away at weaker curses near it. If she stays by his side, it's just a matter of time until she recovers her powers. Later in the day, we see Odan and Incrid practicing by sparring now. Odan comes in with a knee, which Incrid sidesteps to avoid. Odan expected this, as he stretches his hand out, grabbing onto Incrid's face, slamming him straight into the ground. He explains to him that for martial arts, his body needs to be ready just like swordsmanship, and he grabs onto his wrist, saying that this is all meaningless if he is not quick. He tells Incrid that he's still as slow as a turtle, yet his body is definitely changing, and he really doesn't know when to quit. That's because our boy is dedicated. It's been a whole month now, and the greens are starting to sprout through the snow. He spent his days occupied with training, as he's even got all of the boys helping. We see him thrust his sword at Rem, who's surprised, saying that he's improved and now he can fight properly while grinning. He then finishes his meal, telling Ragna that they should spar as well, but Ragna tells him he's still eating, so he waits a bit before getting his ass whooped. Ragna tells him that his adaptability is still lacking, his fundamentals are perfect for now, and his muscle memory alone should be able to do this in his sleep. But it's going to continue to require endless repetition. Incrid sighs and smiles, telling him that is his specialty. That night, he's looking at his blade, saying that training with his squad is great, but more real-life experiences would also be great too. He then hears rustling, which startles him, as Jackson comes in with a surprise attack that he manages to block. Jackson says that he won't die to an ambush anymore and that he has really improved. Crace tells him that he should go outside if he wants to train, and Jackson says that he's in here early, asking why he's not out there getting money. Esther then gets up from the bed, and Crace thinks this is his chance, as he starts looking for a claw, saying that he bet one dropped for sure this time, and that this is money waiting to be found. There's then a knock on the door, as Incrid is trying to get out of the bed. He wonders if Craze is lazy or hardworking. We see it's the ferry commander. She tells Incrid to follow her. He tells her that the snow is all gone, and she says that's not what she's here for, as there's been a new mission. He needs to take care of the mission specifically on the Mercenary Soldier Board. Incrid explains that the Mercenary Soldier Board is a policy that runs alongside the soldier ranking system. It's a policy that allows people in the cities to hire soldiers as mercenaries. It's cheaper than proper mercenaries, and has better trained people as well, which are usually quite polite, so it's pretty popular, and he wanted to test it out himself, so this is a good opportunity. We see a dude yawning, saying that he's finally finished his duty and he's been non-stop working, and he needs to find something new. He then spots Incrid and the ferry commander, as Incrid asks how many he should take. She tells him to do 3 in total and to bring a squad member with him, as she'll be the third. He can't believe she's doing this herself, wondering why. The dude passing by says that he heard they were dueling the other day as well, wondering if maybe they're dating. The ferry commander asks what's wrong with his expression, asking if he finds it uncomfortable to go on a mission with her. Dude can't help but mistake this as romance, and starts spreading the good word. All around the camp now, they are talking about how the company commander and the spellbreaker have a fling going on, and that they apparently have kids together. Later in the day, they start talking about it while Incrid is training, saying they can't believe he managed to pull a fairy with a face like that, saying that's pretty respectable, but they do look great together. Incrid wonders what the hell is going on because of all these rumors. As soon as he heads back to the barracks, Rem yells, saying that Papa's home and asks how many months it's been, and he heard the baby's coming soon. He tells him that they've heard it wrong, and everybody's misunderstanding the rumors. Crace tells him not to be shy, as they're going to find out eventually. He says no. Ragna says that it sounds great and to keep her by her side and train, as even Odon is praising him too. Incrid says he can't help but feel like he's being bullied. As Rem asks when they're going to go on a date, and it'll be weird to be the third wheel, but he's got to do what he's got to do to help his boy out. Incrid asks if he's talking about the mission. He says he is definitely not taking him. Rem says that he has nobody else to take but him, and he points over at Jackson, who says he's ready, and they start heading out. Rem says he can't believe he's taking the damn cat and not him, asking if he got hit in the head recently. Incrid says he'd be the first to ask the commissioner if he got pissed, so definitely can't take him. Jackson asks if he is only bringing him because he thinks he won't cause trouble. Incrid says that he takes these missions often too, so he thought he would be a great help. Jackson says he wants to offer a piece of advice then, and that he shouldn't give too much of his heart to one woman, as it'll come back to hurt him. Incrid says he does not need advice on this. As they meet up with the commander, Incrid asks when the commissioner will be here. She says soon. And he looks off to the side, saying she probably hasn't heard the rumors yet, and it'll be awkward if she did. She instantly asks if they ever did something for people to think they have kids together. He says no, while Jackson holds back his laughter. Incrid asks if he's laughing. Jackson says he doesn't know what he's talking about. Incrid says he definitely heard it. The ferry commander asks if her questions make him uncomfortable, and he says no. She then asks if he's glad, and he says no, but changes it to a yes, and he's starting to get confused, as she teases him. A carriage then pulls up, as Jackson says that the commissioner is now here. The ferry commander clicks her tongue, saying that it was just getting fun, and turns around. Incrid can't believe she was joking with such a blank expression. He explains that the mission was to protect a son of a wealthy merchant, and the process of deciding which of the two heirs of the Rokefried Trading Company will become the next owner. They've been hired to make sure they don't hurt each other. He expected the heir to be some greedy toad, but instead, a pretty woman exits the carriage introducing herself as Leona, and she is the heiress to the Rokefried Company. She tells them all that it's nice to meet them. As they start heading downtown, Leona is whispering to a woman as we see Incrid in the back. He says not a word has been spoken since the initial greeting, and what little communication that does happen is done through her maid, who says that they'll get a room in the inn first, and then wait for the others. They really just want them there to escort her and nothing else. Incrid recalls Odon's words, saying that age, body stance, positioning, and gaze are all important information that he needs to pay attention to, as figuring out the enemy's strategy is a skill in itself. He's observing and analyzing as her guard is left-handed, her footsteps are heavy, wondering if she's heavily armed, and the sword tells him that she's pretty strong. None of them seem to be as strong as a special rank, and while his analysis is lacking, it'll do for now. Jackson says if he's bored they can play a game, and they can identify sounds. Jackson starts naming the sound, and Incrid names where it's from. Jackson says a rustling paper bag, and Incrid says that it's from a woman in the food market. They continue this game, and Jackson then asks them to identify the tongue clicking, and when Incrid starts to listen for it, Jackson says it was too late, and it was coming from the man near the shoe store. Incrid explains that the point of the game is to locate and identify the sources of sounds, and it's way harder than it seems. As they head to the inn, the guard tells them they're going to get a room upstairs, and they can all wait here. The commander sits down with them, saying that what they're doing seems interesting, and she wants to join. Incrid says he's heard that fairies are much more sensitive compared to humans. They continue as Jackson says a knife falling to the ground. Before Incrid can answer, the ferry commander says that the second floor next to the stairs. This happens again as Jackson asks about a dagger being unsheathed. She says it was at the entrance of an inn. Incrid says he's not even able to participate. Then he notices something as the directions of the game start to become more and more as if it's no longer a game. Jackson asks where they're silently being observed from, and the ferry commander says right behind him, as we see a man grabbing onto his blade. They then both deal with the assailants behind them in one quick motion, killing them both. Jackson says they're being ambushed, and she says she agrees. The other mercenaries are panicked at the assassins as we see one coming from behind towards Incrid. He turns, cutting the dude's throat. Then they hear a scream upstairs, and he says the commissioner comes first. He starts to run up as an assassin says no way. He throws knives towards him. Luckily Jackson's played PUBG, so he uses a frying pan to block the knives as the ferry commander starts making light work of the assassins on the first floor. They wonder why they're so strong, and the assassins say they'll just outnumber them. Jackson stabs a dude in the throat while Incrid runs upstairs, and the ferry commander says that all of his squad members are far stronger than him, but they all listen and trust him, and she can't help but wonder why it is this way. As one of the assassins starts charging at her while screaming, she smiles, saying it's interesting, and then turns, stabbing him through the arm and the throat at the same time. Ingrid stabs a dude in the chest, pinning him to a wall, and says after encountering the assassin that went after Krang, and recently the half-fairy assassin, attacks like this no longer faze him. All of the strength and combat skills he's been practicing have made him feel like an entirely different person. Odan says he's still too slow. But he can feel it already, that his movements are much more refined as he kicks the assassin straight in the chest through the railing, sending him off the second floor. He then turns, seeing the female guard thrown out of Leona's room as she hits the railing. He runs up to the door, seeing what's going on as an assassin is yelling glory to Aspen, going to stab at Leona. The maid stands in front of her screaming no. She is really about to Mr. President get down this. Ingrid says he's too close for the whistle daggers, and stopping him can't be guaranteed. He doesn't even know if he'll be able to reach them if he tried. As he starts to recall a way to quickly close the distance, he says he's seen it once. As he recalls the night on the battlefield, he says imitating it perfectly is impossible at his level. As he starts to try his best to do it, he says even if he replicates it a little bit, it'll be good enough. He does exactly that. As he quickly dashes in, making his way closer towards them, the assassin's blade starts coming down. As we see Ingrid make his way in front of it, he uses his back to block the attack. The assassin scrapes against it. He's surprised, and we see that it's actually been blocked by his armor. Ingrid says he's so glad he got this from the Gilfin Guild, telling the assassin that they should have a chat downstairs. He then picks the dude up over his shoulder and yeets both him and himself out of the window, and they land on the ground outside. The assassin starts coughing, and Ingrid stands up, saying that he managed to cushion his fall with the other dude. Leona looks out the window, wondering what the hell that was, and Ingrid says there are no more enemies on the second floor. This guy here is definitely in pain from the fall, but he's still standing up, which proves that he's got some grit. The dude pulls out a second blade, calling him crazy, asking if he is a border guard. Ingrid says no. The dude says that means there's no reason he shouldn't be able to beat him, as he pulls out a second blade. Ingrid says that even though the dude's swords are of different lengths, he's not off balance. Ingrid wonders if he knows how to use the flowing sword, thinking about how to respond. The assassin says that he's going to kill him first, and then destroy that woman. Ingrid asks him if anyone else has told him that he talks way too damn much. He gets pissed, charging in, and Ingrid says this is his first real fight in a while, and that the dude seems pretty strong. Ingrid lowers his back foot, starting to get into position, wondering what he should try first. The assassin, ready to thrust one of his blades, raises the other into the air. Ingrid says that both of these attacks are going to come in unison, and that it is a Valen duet. As one of the blades comes towards his head, he sidesteps to his left. The assassin immediately follows up with a swing, which he ducks underneath. The dude then tries it again by thrusting forward, which Ingrid backpedals. Now that there's distance, the assassin comes in for a big lunging thrust, which Ingrid avoids by ducking to the dude's other side. He stands behind the guy as he starts to realize he might have screwed up. He can't believe some random has dodged all of his attacks, and Ingrid tells him he's impressed. He couldn't learn that because he lacks the talent. Based on the guy's speed and accuracy, he's about as good as the stabbing pervert he met in his first loop. The guy comes back in, asking what he's saying, calling him crazy. As Ingrid locks in his eyes focus, he starts to hone in on the guy's blades, and says now he understands as he can tell which path of attack the assassin is going to use. Ingrid then raises up his arm and smoothly starts to move his blade forward, stabbing the dude in the chest while having zero wasted movements in doing so. Ingrid is a little surprised, says he wanted to stab him in the heart, but he missed a bit. The dude starts to scream as Ingrid pulls his blade out. He says he still needs to improve a lot, and he needs to train with both Ragna and Jackson. Ingrid then looks at the dude as he falls to the floor, as the other assassins run out the back door, saying they need to retreat. Ingrid says he has to go get them all, but Jackson tells him that his fight drew too much attention. Ingrid points, saying they're getting away, and Jackson says they are, making Ingrid wonder if he's not going to chase them. He says they weren't commissioned to root out criminals. They ran away on their own, so the commissioner should be safe. Ingrid says he must be solely focused on the mission. The ferry commander then tells him that wasn't bad, and he asks if she's okay. She then tilts her head, saying she can't believe he's worried about his lover, and that she's not going to be able to sleep with all these butterflies in her stomach. He stares at her with the stone face emoji, and Leona asks if they're in a relationship. He says no, and she continues asking if everything they've done so far was a joke to him. He once again hits the stone face, asking what the hell is wrong with everybody. Leona asks his name, and Ingrid tells her. She thanks him for protecting her, saying she will pay him properly in the future. He says it's fine, and it was what was asked of him. She looks at him like there's more she wants to say, but she doesn't yet. It then jumps to some time later, and he explains that the few they captured were sent to the army, and they were sent reinforcements in case of a second attack. Ingrid sits at a table wondering who the assassins were, saying that some of them were pretty skilled, so they definitely weren't just here to rob them, and he guesses they have to assume it's the other heirs of the company. Leona starts to make her way downstairs, saying he's up pretty early, and he tells her that this is his shift. She then sits down beside him, scooting her chair close, saying he should join her, and she'll give him a chance to join her personal forces, as their rogue-fried company leaves little to desire. Their key partners include the Shepherds of the Wilderness from the Beastlands, the Black Leather Guild that is famed for hunting dragons, and the Glacial Rangers who were the defenders of the permafrost. Additionally, the company map, which outlines key routes and regional specialties, is valuable enough to let those who sell it live without wanting anything more for the rest of their lives. All of this is too much for him to leave behind. She says that the previous owner's sons are all stupid. She needs to protect and grow this organization, and she needs talented people to do that. People who are talented enough to save her from the brink of death and a personality that doesn't seek additional rewards. A position at her association is wanted by most, and that he's probably no different. She tells him once more that she'll get him anything he wants and to come join her. He says nah. She can't believe he did that with zero hesitation, asking why. Jackson comes down the stairs, saying that continuing to ask after being refused is unsightly. The commander also says that it's not very becoming of a merchant to do so. Leona bows, saying that they're right and that other heirs of the association will arrive at noon, and she needs to prepare for that. As she heads back upstairs, the other two start to walk towards Ingrid, and Jackson says he managed to seduce a rich heiress too, asking if difficult women is his type. He says no, and Jackson continues, saying he needs to stop going around seducing all these women. He says he never did that in the first place, as the ferry commander calls him a two-timer, saying that hurts her. He grits his teeth, saying that he's sorry, and that his taste must have just changed. Jackson is surprised, and so is she, that he actually had a comeback. People from outside overhear this, saying they can't believe he's an asshole that seduced another woman when he asked the commander. The ferry commander then smiles, since she took this W. As he sits there in complete shame that he went along with it. Later on, we hear Craze saying he heard everything, that he spent the night with the commissioner after one night. Everybody starts saying that he's managed to score a rich heiress now, and that he's not the spellbreaker but the heartbreaker. Jackson asks Craze if he's here to make fun of him too, and he says that it's about the Gilfin Guild, and he needs to stay on top of things. Ingrid says that's good, and he needs to do something for him. He needs to catch the ones who got away and see what they're up to. We learn that Reynolds Roquefried, the previous owner of the Roquefried Merchant Association, was an honorable man with a sharp business mindset. He considered his stepdaughter, Leona, to be his successor due to her sharp wit and intellect, but he could not bring himself to push his son out of the picture. His barber did him dirty. So, without a clear successor to lead the Merchant Association, he passed away. We see a carriage in town as the kid who needs to fire his barber is being told the assassins failed. They say that he should have left it to them, and it was a missed opportunity. The kid's name is Polide. The man opposite of him says that they'll figure something out, and their agreement surely still stands. Polide says, of course, and he'll reward him handsomely if he inherits everything. The other dude in the carriage sits there not saying anything. They then arrive at the inn, and they open the door. Ingrid and the rest stare at him as Polide says there's too much dust here, and he says that calling him to a place like this is typical of that bitch, Leona. Ingrid stares at the dude with the black hair, saying that he can tell just by the way he holds himself that he's strong. The man glances down at him, making eye contact, then looks away as if he's not much of a threat to him. Polide then points at them, saying they need to go call Leona. Ingrid says it was a great idea to bring Jackson because if it was Rem, he would have mistaken the dude as a monster and cracked his skull open. He then sees Jackson pulling out his blade and stops him as Polide barks at him, asking him what he's doing and to get moving. Leona comes downstairs, telling him to stop shouting as it's not fitting of him, and tells him that he's late. He says, late my ass, and she should educate her bodyguards. She then slaps the piss out of him, and Ingrid says that nobody around him is normal at all, and he sighs. Jackson looks like he doesn't realize he's the odd one out. Polide asks if she's crazy and what she's doing. Leona says that he was the crazy one, and he's messing with a soldier mercenary of the border guards, asking if he wants to rot in prison for the rest of his life. He says that he didn't know about that, and the man behind him clears his throat, which scares him a little bit, and says that wasn't him, asking who she's trying to frame and how dare she, an outsider, yell at him. Leona says that sure she was adopted, but he can't even analyze trade routes or even calculate finances. He tells her that's a job for servants, and she says that she wouldn't be wasting time like this if it weren't for the will, and stating that the successor is to be decided after talks is way too much. Ingrid says the previous head must have been soft, and no matter how you look at it, Leona seems more suited to be a successor, and he wonders if he wanted to give his son one last chance. Leona says the only argument he has to support his succession is that he's a blood relative. Polite asks why that's important, and she grabs him by his fat chin, saying that no matter how she looks at it, he's nothing like him, and his ignorance and ugly-ass face make her wonder who he got it from. He grabs onto his blade, hella pissed, as Ingrid does his as well. He then is startled by something as he sees the dude he was glaring at earlier reach for his too. He then widens his stance as everybody is getting ready for the gang war. Ingrid sits there waiting for somebody to make a move, and Polide starts to get scared as his guards block him. Ingrid recognizes the stance, saying that the man is going to use the swift sword, but he wonders how fast it will be, saying he wonders if it will be as fast as Rem's axe or a whistle dagger, and tells the dude to show him his sword. As the guy starts to unsheath his blade, Ingrid smiles, doing the same as he unsheathes his blade too, but then a man tells everybody to stop. As he enters the room, we see it's none other than Torres, who says that he is part of the border guards who are directly commanded by the crown, and they'll consider them to have committed treason if they don't put their blades away. Polide looks like this wasn't part of his plans, and Ingrid also looks a little annoyed and then clicks his tongue. Jackson stares at him, recalling how he was talking about nobody around him being normal, and says that he's the weirdest dude here. As Torres says the assassins hired were foreigners, so they're taking over this case. They confess that they were paid by a merchant association, and surely Polide didn't hire them because of this inheritance dispute. The man puppeteering him asks if any of them confess to have been paid by their specific merchant association, and if not, then there's no evidence to blame them. Torres says he sure does yap a lot, asking if he thinks that they're that stupid. Leona says she would like to make an offer, and they should find more evidence to identify the true perpetrators, and that they can lock both her and Polide up until they find the ones responsible. Polide says that he didn't agree to this, and Ingrid finds it strange that the victim is asking to be locked up. Torres says the ones they detained were all grunts who had no information. They just kept repeating that they were told to do so by their boss. Leona says there are still people to interrogate, as people managed to escape from that scene, and one of them might be the boss with the details, and that they should try to find them. Torres says that he wants to know what they should do if they can't find the ones behind it, and she says that's for him to deal with. Although it's not prudent to continue discussing the air matter of the border guards, they will return to their city under the condition that they all return if they were to be summoned. Ingrid says that they won't be guarding her if they leave the city, and her bodyguards won't be able to take on Polides, especially the guy with the rapier, so she'll die as soon as she leaves the protection of the border guards. Surely she knows this, wondering what the hell she is thinking. Her maid hands her something, and she says she's a merchant, so she doesn't ask for anything without proper compensation, and she'll give this to whoever catches the ones who got away. As she starts to unsheath it, Jackson is obviously startled by it, which Ingrid wonders what's going on, and she says this is the fourth work of the Carmen collection. It's Carmen's stiletto. She says hopefully this is enough to get them to go find them. Jackson steps up, calling out to Ingrid, saying that he'll take this one. Ingrid wonders what's got him so motivated and why that dagger is so special to him. Polide recognizes it as well, asking if she is insane and if she doesn't know how much that thing is worth. She says the stiletto is hers, so she can do what she pleases with it. Ingrid asks if it's that amazing. Jackson says he's surprised he doesn't know about it, and it was made by a legendary weaponsmith named Carmen. Originally a slave, Carmen worked as an assassin out for revenge and used 7 weapons of his own creation. The fourth among them was the stiletto. There are people who would offer up people's lives for the weapons as well. Torres then says that since everybody is present, he's going to hold them all, and nobody is allowed to leave the inn. Ingrid tells Jackson not to worry about the stiletto, as he told Craze to get the dudes from earlier, so they should hear from him soon. Polide starts to get pissed while the guy with the rapier looks over, glancing at Ingrid, who turns, and they make eye contact once more. Looks like the dude might acknowledge him now as he turns away. Ingrid watches him leave. That night Polide says if things lead back to them like this, it's going to be a problem. The puppeteer says they can't do anything against the border guards, and they just need to wait. If the two of them can't sort out who becomes the successor, then the decision will be left up to the investors, which is what they need to use. Polide says that'll be fine, as he already sent word. He already told them he'd reward them if they place him as the successor, and he'll win if just half of them agree. The man with the rapier looks out the window to see Incred doing planks with stones on his back. He's clearly having a hard time, but of course, bro is dedicated. He finishes his workout, and Torres asks why he's doing all that tedious training. Incred wonders what Torres wants, and Torres says that surely this is a prime opportunity for some time off. Incred says he would think that way if their time were equal, but time is valued differently from geniuses and those who are not. And things they can learn in a week, he needs a month or sometimes even a year to learn, and that means he doesn't have any time to waste. He then picks up the rocks again, starting to do curls, saying that he'll make sure to use each and every day to make sure his foundation is better to allow his future to be brighter. One of Torres's men says that he sure is an odd one, or maybe they are the ones that are lazy. Torres thinks about it for a second and then decides to get up, telling Incred to calm down with trying to get stronger, as he's already plenty strong. They only had a draw because he didn't expect that from him, wondering what he thinks the outcome would be now. Incred stares at him and then smiles while nodding, which means that they are about to start fighting. We hear people cheering them on as we see Torres preparing an attack, and both he and Incred stop shy of each other's throats. But obviously Torres would have won. They start cheering, saying that this makes 7 wins for Torres, and he says this is how it should be. They remind him he also lost 4 times too. Incred tells him to run it back. Torres asks if he's not tired yet, calling him a fiend, saying they've already gone at it 11 times. One of Torres' men says he wants to try as well, and the dude from earlier says he wants to do it too. If they've introduced these guys before, my bad, I haven't done this series in a while, it just now got enough chapters for another part. They start cheering, saying they need to take him down, and Polide watches, asking what they are doing so late, calling them barbarians. The guy who subbed out Torres is now throwing Incred to the ground, and as soon as he hits it, we see the man with the rapier is actually watching intently. Incred asks what that was and if he can do it again. The dude calls him insane, and the rapier guy says that his pride isn't hurt when he loses, rather, it's like a little kid who found something new to play with. On top of that, his open hostility while knowing he's far stronger than him is certainly unique. But even so, as we see Incred fall to the ground again, the dude says he falls for the same thing at least 3 to 4 times, and he's really not talented at fighting whatsoever. This time Incred slaps the dude's hand away and hits him with a judo throw, doing the exact same thing the guy did, slamming him into the ground. Torres starts cheering him on, saying good shit, and even the rest do, asking who's going to do it next. We see the ferry commander watching, saying that he's going around charming everybody, and that makes him a bad man. Leona asks if they are dating, and the ferry commander says no. Leona asks if it was a joke then, as the ferry commander tells them they are married. Leona gets surprised, and the ferry commander says they didn't hold a ceremony, but she thinks there's a child. Leona is even more confused, and Incred says this bothers him, and he really wishes she just had gone inside already. We then hear the rapier man call out, asking if it would be okay if he joined in with them. Incred turns as we see the dude raring to go. Torres wonders what he's thinking, and the dude says that his talent is by no means worth speaking of, yet he still has a desire to teach him, and he can't hold himself back from doing so. The man who taught him the throw says that the rapier dude's in a different boat from them, and that he should just sit down and watch, but Incred says nah, and he's been waiting for this. The dude stares at him, realizing he's a man of culture, and smiles while Jackson watches from the roof. He says that even though the only thing that dude's holding is a wooden stick, he is still hella dangerous, and he grabs onto his blade, saying he needs to make sure he's prepared. Incred readies his stick as well as the man with the rapier gets ready. They start to have a WWE stare down, and the man raises up his wooden stick. Incred says that tension is creeping up his entire body as if he was at war again. The man then begins to thrust forward as Incred focuses his eyes. Concentrating on a single point, he can see the dude's attack path. He says there's a slight feint mixed in, but it's coming for his neck, and he needs to block his line and extend his own. But then he feels as if he just got stabbed in the throat, which surprises him. As we see that Incred couldn't react in time, but it's not just him, everybody is surprised. The dude says he read his attack well, but he's slow. Incred says that he lives up to the name of the Swift Sword, and it's so much faster than he imagined. He thought he'd gotten a lot stronger, but he hasn't. The dude is so inconceivably far, and it's at a height that's so intimidating. As the dude starts to walk away, Incred laughs and tells the dude, "One more." The man smiles, saying that his attitude is exceptional. He continues losing over and over to the point where Torres and the rest fall asleep. We see the ferry commander still watching intently, and she looks like she's really enjoying it. We see Incred losing his balance. The man with the rapier starts speaking, saying that anyone who has ever held a sword knows the despair one feels when meeting someone you can't beat. Incred falls to the floor and begins coughing, and he says that he's shown him this unbridgeable gap between them, but for some reason, he's not giving up. Incred stands back up, and Jackson says that Incred's reaction speed is too slow to be seeing and dodging everything. At this rate, he'll never overcome this wall, and he says he's going to have to teach him something more about his speed. The man says that's enough, and they should get some sleep as Incred is gassed out. We see him sweating hella, and he tells the dude he's amazing and that Swift Sword is something that he will eventually learn. The dude laughs, saying he's even more impressed by him. It's unfortunate, if only he had the slightest bit more talent. Later on, we hear Craze calling out to both Incred and Torres, saying they've captured the runaway mercenaries as they are beaten up on the floor in front of them. Incred nods, telling him good job, and Craze says that it was just finding a couple of hidden people, no big deal. Leona says they must be Incred's squad members, thanking him for it again. He still has his armor torn from when he protected her last time. Torres then asks who hired them and asks which people it was. Belide's fat little diabetes heart starts beating really fast, and the mercenary then speaks up, saying that it was Aspen. It was a merchants association from there that wanted to expand across the contested zones, and he doesn't know which specific one. He only received a letter, and the money was promised upon completion. Leona says that might be what he's saying, but what happens next is up to the border guards. Torres says that she seems satisfied by the outcome, asking if she wasn't hoping that the ugly idiot was behind all of this. She says of course she did, enough to offer up the precious stiletto as a reward. Torres says that breaking these bastards is their job, and that all the rogue-fried people are free to go. As everybody starts leaving, Jackson unsheaths the stiletto, and Incred tells him not to do that in public. He can't believe he's so happy, saying it's almost as if he's a kid sometimes. Craze then tells Incred not to love Leona, as she's scary. He says he doesn't, asking if he's even listening to him. Craze then says it's weird. No matter how he thinks about it, those guys were hired by Polide. Yet they are saying it was Aspen. He had a little run-in yesterday after they found those guys. We see them in a room with the mercs, and a man enters, asking if he is Craze of the 444th Squad. He says that he's someone who serves Leona, which confused Craze. He continues explaining to Incred they already had tabs on where they were and knew everything about the Gilfin Guild too. They wanted to pay the military to let those mercs go and told them to say what they did. Incred wonders why, saying that Leona is going to be disadvantaged now. If Polide is the one who was behind this, it would have been better for her. But on cue, she says it's a relief he wasn't behind it, as it would have left a bad record on the previous leader's accomplishments. He now understands it was out of loyalty to the previous leader. She says surely he's not interested in these kinds of things. He asks her if this will even be okay, saying she won't be able to receive their protection outside of the border, and if he decides to come attack again she'll be in danger. She says that it's already been taken care of and not to worry. As we see a whole group of troops waiting at the front of the gate, a knight-like man stands on guard with his platoon behind him. He introduces himself as the Roquefried Merchant Association Guard Corps Commander, Mattis, and he says that he is here to escort the new leader, Leona. They all then start bowing towards her. Incred says that she had them held up here on purpose and managed to get a vote going with the shareholders in the meantime. She has loyalty, decisive action, and information, which means she truly is a scary woman. She says asking again would be undignified, so she won't tell Incred to accompany her, but he has a knack for having people root for him, and she hopes that they can meet each other again in the future as friends. He looks down at her hand and shakes it, saying of course. Polide hops out of his whip, asking Mattis what he's doing, calling him a bastard, asking if he doesn't know how nice his father was to him, yet he betrayed him. Mattis tells him to stop dishonoring his name and calls him a dumbass, which scares the little lardass to the point he might have dropped a brick in his pants. The puppeteer says it turned out to be a failure, and the man with the rapier says they got something out of it at least. Now they know that the new leader of the Roquefried Empire is quite cunning. He then glances to his side, saying that he also learned about the existence of a peculiar soldier. If you've watched till the end, comment, Axe, to let me know. Subscribe for more videos like this, leave a like or a comment to help the channel out. Thanks for watching.